I was folding Robert's clothes when the phone rang. It had been 3 weeks since the funeral, and I still couldn't bring myself to pack away his things. His shirt still smelled like his cologne, that woody, cedar scent he'd worn for 42 years. I held a sweater to my face and breathed in deep, trying to hold on to something, anything, that still felt like him. The house was too quiet. It had been too quiet since the morning he didn't wake up beside me. The phone kept ringing. I almost didn't answer. Most calls those days were condolences I didn't have the strength to receive, or worse, lawyers, financial advisors, people who wanted to talk about money when all I wanted was my husband back. But something made me pick up. Maybe it was muscle memory. Maybe it was the part of me that still believed, foolishly, that someone might be calling to check on me, to ask how I was doing, to care. Mrs. Patricia Westfield. The voice was young, female, professional in that cold way that people are when they're about to deliver bad news. Yes, I said, setting down the sweater. This is Jennifer Kowalski from Morrison & Associates. I'm calling on behalf of your son, Gregory Westfield, and his wife, Vanessa. I'm their attorney. My son had an attorney. Calling me. Before you keep listening, do me a favor, leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know who's out there, listening to an old woman's story. And if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been cast aside by the people who were supposed to love you most, then you're going to want to hear what comes next. Hit that subscribe button, because this story doesn't go where you think it does. And check the description box below. I've shared more stories like this one, stories about betrayal, survival, and what happens when you refuse to stay silent. My son needs an attorney to speak to me. I heard my voice crack. Mrs. Westfield, I'm calling to inform you that my clients are filing a lawsuit against you regarding the estate of Robert James Westfield. They're contesting the will and seeking to recover the full $10 million left to you, which they believe was intended for Gregory as the rightful heir and only biological child of the deceased. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed, Robert's sweater still clutched in my hand. $10 million. Robert had been a brilliant man, a self-made millionaire who'd built his wealth through careful investments in real estate and technology startups back when most people didn't understand what the internet would become. He'd grown up with nothing, just like me. We'd met when we were both young and struggling, two people who understood hunger and hard work. We'd built a life together. A good life. And when he'd become successful, he'd never forgotten where he came from. Never forgotten me. But Gregory had forgotten me a long time ago. Mrs. Westfield? Are you still there? Yes, I whispered. I'm here. You'll be receiving formal documentation within 48 hours. I'd advise you to retain legal counsel. The hearing is scheduled for 6 weeks from today. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there in the silence of that big, empty house, holding my dead husband's sweater, and I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. I had lost my son long before I lost my husband. Maybe I'd lost him when he went away to college and came back speaking differently, dressing differently, looking at me like I was something embarrassing from his past. Maybe I'd lost him when he married Vanessa, that cold, blonde woman with the perfect teeth and the master's degree who'd made it clear from the first family dinner that she considered me beneath her. Or maybe I'd lost him gradually, piece by piece, every time he forgot to call on my birthday, every time he made excuses about why they couldn't visit for the holidays, every time he looked through me instead of at me. I had spent years trying to understand what I'd done wrong. I'd replayed every conversation, every interaction, searching for the moment when my son had stopped loving me. When I'd become an obligation instead of his mother. An embarrassment instead of someone he was proud of. But sitting there that afternoon, with the California sun streaming through the windows of the house Robert had bought us, the house I'd kept perfect for him for 4 decades, I realized I'd been asking the wrong question. The question wasn't what I'd done wrong. The question was what I was going to do now. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you would have died for, you know exactly how I felt in that moment. It's not just pain. It's not just anger. It's something deeper, a kind of grief that doesn't have a name, because it's mourning someone who's still alive. Someone who chose to stop seeing you. Someone who looked at you and decided you weren't worth their time, their love, their respect. My hands were shaking as I set down the phone. Robert's sweater fell from my lap to the floor. I left it there. I walked downstairs to Robert's study, a room I'd barely entered since his death. It still looked exactly as he'd left it, papers organized in neat stacks, his reading glasses folded on the desk, a cold cup of coffee with a film on the surface. He'd been in here working the night before he died. Planning something. Always planning, always thinking ahead. That's what had made him successful. That's what had protected us. I sat in his chair, a massive leather thing that dwarfed me, and I opened the top drawer of his desk. Inside was an envelope with my name on it in Robert's handwriting. Patricia. My heart hammered as I picked it up. It hadn't been sealed. Inside was a letter, dated 2 days before his death, and clipped to it were several documents, legal papers, account statements, things I didn't understand. The letter was short. Asterisk, my dearest Patricia, asterisk. Asterisk, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're alone. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry I couldn't give you more time. I'm sorry for a lot of things. Asterisk. Asterisk, you're going to receive everything I have, all of it. I made sure of that in the will, and I've taken steps to ensure it can't be easily contested. The house, the investments, the accounts, it's all yours now. You earned every penny of it by standing beside me for 42 years, through poverty and success, through my mistakes and my victories. You never asked for anything. You never complained. You loved me when I was nobody, and you loved me just the same when I was somebody. Asterisk. Asterisk, but I have to be honest with you, my love. I'm worried about Gregory. Asterisk. Asterisk, our son has changed. I don't know when it happened exactly, but somewhere along the way, he forgot the values we tried to teach him. He forgot kindness. He forgot gratitude. He's become someone who measures worth in dollar signs and status symbols. I've tried to reach him. God knows I've tried. But Vanessa has him convinced that we're somehow holding him back, that our working class roots are something to be ashamed of. She looks at you like you're the help, Patricia. I've seen it. It makes my blood boil. Asterisk. Asterisk, I'm leaving everything to you because you deserve it. But also because I don't trust what Gregory would do with it. Not anymore. Not with Vanessa whispering in his ear. Asterisk. Asterisk, I've left instructions with my attorney, Daniel Freeman at Freeman Legal Group. If anything happens, if Gregory tries to fight this, you go to Daniel. He knows everything. He'll protect you. Asterisk. Asterisk, I'm also including some documents in this envelope. Keep them safe. Keep them private. You'll understand why when the time comes. Asterisk. Asterisk, I love you, Patricia. I've loved you since the day I met you at that bus stop in 1982, both of us soaked from the rain, both of us late for work, both of us laughing about how broke we were. You were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. You still are. Asterisk. Asterisk, don't let them take what's yours. Don't let them make you feel small. Asterisk. Asterisk, you were never small to me. Asterisk. Asterisk, forever yours. Asterisk. Asterisk, Robert. Asterisk. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face, blurring the words. Then I looked at the documents he'd clipped to it. Bank statements showing transfers I hadn't known about. Legal filings I didn't understand. And a sealed envelope marked "Do not open until necessary" in Robert's careful handwriting. I held that sealed envelope in my hands for a long time, my heart pounding. The weight of it felt significant, like it contained something that would change everything. Something dangerous. Something powerful. But I didn't open it. Not yet. Robert had said until necessary, and I trusted him. Even in death, I trusted him. Instead, I picked up the phone and called Daniel Freeman. He answered on the second ring, and his voice was kind when he heard mine. Patricia. I've been expecting your call. I'm so sorry about Robert. And I'm sorry about what Gregory is putting you through. You knew he would sue me. Robert predicted it, Daniel said quietly. About 3 months ago, Gregory approached him asking for a loan, $500,000 to invest in some cryptocurrency scheme. Robert refused. Gregory got angry, said some things, told Robert that he'd better remember who his real family was. That when Robert was gone, Gregory would make sure he got what he deserved. Robert called me the next day and changed his will to make absolutely certain you were protected. I closed my eyes, pain radiating through my chest. Why didn't Robert tell me? He didn't want to hurt you, Daniel said. He kept hoping Gregory would come around. That he'd apologize. But then, well, then Robert died, and now here we are. They want to take everything. They can try, Daniel said, and there was steel in his voice now. But we're going to fight them, Patricia. And we're going to win. Robert made sure of that. Can you come to my office tomorrow? We need to prepare. I agreed, and we made an appointment for 10 in the morning. After I hung up, I sat in Robert's chair for another hour, holding his letter, staring at that sealed envelope. The house creaked around me, settling into evening. Somewhere in the neighborhood, children were laughing. A dog barked. Normal sounds of normal lives. But my life wasn't normal anymore. My husband was dead. My son was suing me. And I was about to walk into a battle I'd never wanted and didn't understand. But I'll tell you what I did understand. I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to let Gregory and that awful woman take what Robert had left me. Not just the money, but the final gift of his love, his trust, his belief that I deserved to be cared for. I was 67 years old. I'd spent my whole life being quiet, being accommodating, being the dutiful wife and the hopeful mother. I'd spent decades making myself smaller so other people could feel bigger. Those days were over. Asterisk asterisk, approx. 1,890 words, asterisk asterisk. Chapter 2. The family I thought I had. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, our bed, Robert's and mine, staring at the ceiling, watching shadows from the streetlight outside move across the plaster like ghosts. The house had never felt so empty. Every creak of the floorboards reminded me I was alone. Every silence reminded me that Robert wouldn't be rolling over to ask if I was okay, wouldn't be reaching for my hand in the darkness like he'd done for 42 years. I kept thinking about Gregory. Not the man who was suing me, but the boy he'd been. The child I'd rocked to sleep when he had nightmares. The little boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard and call them flowers, his face so proud, so full of love. The teenager who'd hugged me at his high school graduation and whispered thank you for everything, Mom, into my hair. Where had that person gone? I got up around 3 in the morning and wandered through the house like a ghost myself. I found myself in Gregory's old room. We'd kept it mostly the same even after he'd moved out, even though he never visited anymore. There were still posters on the walls from his high school years. Sports trophies on the shelf. A photograph of the 3 of us at Disneyland when he was 12, all of us grinning, sunburned, and happy. I picked up that photograph and studied it in the dim light from the hallway. Robert had his arm around me. Gregory was between us, making a silly face at the camera. We looked like a family. A real family. The kind that loved each other. What happened to us? I'll tell you what happened. Life happened. Success happened. And somewhere along the way, my son learned to be ashamed of where he came from. Robert and I had grown up poor. I mean really poor. I was raised in a trailer park in Nevada by a single mother who worked 3 jobs and still couldn't always keep the lights on. Robert had grown up in rural Idaho, the youngest of 6 kids, wearing hand-me-downs and going hungry more often than not. We'd met in Los Angeles in 1982, both of us fresh off the bus from nowhere, both of us working minimum wage jobs and living in apartments with cockroaches and broken heaters. We were 22 years old, broke, scared, and madly in love. We got married at City Hall with 2 strangers as witnesses. Our honeymoon was walking on Venice Beach and splitting a sandwich. We thought we had everything. And for a long time, we did have everything that mattered. We had each other. We had Gregory, born 3 years later after we'd finally scraped together enough for a small apartment in a better neighborhood. We had dreams and plans and the kind of bone-deep partnership that comes from building a life from nothing, together. Robert started working in construction, then taught himself about real estate investing. He read everything he could get his hands on. He took night classes. He saved every penny. And slowly, over years and years, he built something. He bought his first investment property when Gregory was 10. A second when Gregory was 13. By the time Gregory graduated high school, we were comfortable. Not wealthy yet, but comfortable. And that's when I first noticed my son pulling away. It was small things at first. He'd correct my grammar. He'd cringe when I used the wrong fork at a restaurant. He started asking us not to attend his college events because he said we wouldn't fit in with the other families. He stopped bringing friends home. When he did visit, he'd look around our house, the house Robert had bought with his own money, the house we'd worked so hard for, and I could see the judgment in his eyes. The embarrassment. Like what we'd built wasn't good enough. Like we weren't good enough. And then he met Vanessa. Vanessa Hamilton, with her degree from Stanford and her family money and her country club manners. She was beautiful in that cold, polished way, tall and thin with yoga-toned arms and highlighted hair that always looked perfect. She worked in marketing for some tech company, made 6 figures, and never let you forget it. I tried so hard with her. God, I tried. I invited them to dinner. I asked about her work. I complimented her clothes, her hair, her everything. I wanted her to like me. I wanted her to see that even though I hadn't gone to college, even though I spoke differently than her family did, even though I'd spent my life waiting tables and cleaning houses while Robert built his business, I was still a person worth knowing. Worth loving. But Vanessa looked right through me from day one. I remember the first time they came to our house for dinner. Gregory had been dating her for about 6 months. I'd spent all day cooking, my pot roast, the one Gregory used to beg for when he was a kid. I'd set the table with our nice dishes. I'd even bought flowers for the centerpiece. Vanessa walked in wearing designer jeans and heels that probably cost more than my car payment. She shook my hand like we were in a business meeting. She didn't smile. "So this is where Gregory grew up," she said, looking around our living room like she was touring a museum of poverty. "It's very quaint." Quaint. That was her word for the home Robert and I had poured our hearts into. During dinner, she barely touched my pot roast. She kept checking her phone. When Robert tried to tell a story about Gregory as a kid, she interrupted to talk about her family's vacation home in Aspen. When I asked about her parents, she said they were influential in San Francisco society. The way she said it made it clear that we were not influential. That we were not society. That we were nothing. After that dinner, the visits became less frequent. Then rare. Then almost non-existent. Gregory called less and less. The calls we did get were rushed, distracted. He was busy with work. They were traveling. They had plans. Always plans that didn't include us. Holidays became negotiations. Could they come for Thanksgiving? No, they were going to Vanessa's parents' place in Napa. Christmas? They were doing a ski trip. Easter? They were actually really busy with a home renovation. The excuses piled up like snow, until we were buried under them. Robert saw it happening. He talked to Gregory about it once, man to man. I don't know everything that was said, but Robert came home that day looking older than I'd ever seen him. He held me in the kitchen and whispered, "I don't know our son anymore." Neither did I. The last time I saw Gregory before Robert died was at Robert's 70th birthday party, 2 years ago. We'd planned a small gathering, just family and a few of Robert's close friends. Gregory and Vanessa showed up an hour late. Vanessa spent the entire time on her phone. Gregory gave his father a handshake and a watch that still had the price tag on it, $89.99, marked down from the department store. Robert had given Gregory everything. Had paid for his college. Had helped him with his first car, his first apartment deposit. Had offered advice and support and unconditional love for 38 years. And Gregory gave him an $89.99 watch and a handshake. I cried that night after they left. Robert held me and said, "It's not your fault, Patricia. Some people forget where they came from. Some people decide that love is embarrassing and money is what matters. That's on him, not us." But it felt like my fault. Isn't that what mothers do? We blame ourselves for everything our children become. Now, standing in Gregory's old bedroom at 3 in the morning, holding that photograph from Disneyland, I finally let myself feel the anger underneath the grief. My son was suing me. Not calling to check on me after his father's funeral. Not asking if I was okay, if I needed anything, if I was lonely in this big house without the man who'd been my whole world. Suing me. Taking me to court to strip away everything his father had left me, to declare that I didn't deserve it, that my 42 years of partnership and love and support meant nothing compared to his biological claim. And Vanessa was behind it. I knew she was. Gregory had loved me once. Gregory had been kind once. But Vanessa had spent 8 years poisoning him against me, making him believe that his upbringing was something to overcome, that his parents were obstacles to his success, that money and status were more important than loyalty and love. I set the photograph back on the shelf and left the room. In the kitchen, I made coffee even though it was barely 4 in the morning. My hands were steadier now. The grief was hardening into something else. Something stronger. I thought about Robert's letter. About the sealed envelope I hadn't opened yet. About his warning to go to Daniel Freeman, his attorney who knew everything. What did Daniel know? What had Robert prepared for this moment? The coffee finished brewing, and I poured a cup, adding cream and sugar the way Robert always made it for me. The familiar ritual hurt and comforted in equal measure. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text message. From Gregory. My heart seized. For one stupid, hopeful moment, I thought maybe he was calling it off. Maybe he'd woken up and realized what he was doing. Maybe my son was still in there somewhere, underneath whatever Vanessa had made him become. I opened the message. Mom. The lawyers will be sending paperwork. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Dad would have wanted his money to go to his actual heir. It's not personal. Just sign the papers and we can settle this quietly. Not personal. He was suing me for $10 million, erasing my 42-year marriage, declaring that I didn't deserve my husband's love and trust, and it wasn't personal. I read that message 5 times, each time feeling something inside me grow colder and harder. Then I did something I'd never done before. I didn't respond. I didn't try to explain. I didn't beg him to reconsider or tell him he was breaking my heart. I just deleted the message and finished my coffee. By the time the sun came up, I'd showered, dressed, and pulled myself together. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, 6 to 7 years old, grey hair that I'd always been too self-conscious to wear loose, so I kept it in a practical bun, lines around my eyes from a lifetime of smiling even when things were hard, calloused hands from years of work. I looked like someone's grandmother, someone's widow, someone who could be dismissed, overlooked, underestimated. Good. Let them underestimate me. When you spend your whole life being invisible, you learn things. You learn to watch. You learn to listen. You learn to notice the things that people think don't matter. And you learn that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one no one's paying attention to. I had my appointment with Daniel Freeman at 10. 6 hours to wait. I spent them going through Robert's papers, trying to understand the scope of his estate. $10 million. It was an incomprehensible amount of money to me. I'd grown up with nothing. I'd spent most of my life counting pennies and clipping coupons. But it wasn't about the money. Not really. It was about what that money represented. Robert's love. His trust. His final gift to me, the woman who'd stood by him through everything. And I'd be damned if I let them take it. Approx. 1,950 words, **. Chapter 3. Gathering my weapons. Daniel Freeman's office was in downtown Los Angeles, in one of those glass towers that always made me nervous. I'd grown up thinking places like this weren't for people like me, that I'd be stopped at the door, asked what I was doing there, told politely that I didn't belong. But Robert had belonged everywhere he went because he'd learned that money and confidence could take you anywhere. And he'd left me that money and tried to teach me that confidence, even if I'd never quite believed it myself. Until now. The receptionist was young and polished, with perfect makeup and a smile that was friendly but professional. "Mrs. Westfield? Mr. Freeman is expecting you. Please, follow me." She led me through hallways lined with mahogany and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. My city. The place where I'd arrived at 22 with nothing but a duffel bag and a dream. The place where I'd built a life, raised a son, loved a good man. Daniel Freeman's office was corner suite with a view that probably cost more per month than my first apartment had cost per year. But Daniel himself was warm and unpretentious, standing to greet me with a genuine smile and a firm handshake. He was in his 50s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Patricia," he said, guiding me to a leather chair. "Thank you for coming. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "Water would be nice," I said, my throat suddenly dry. He poured from a crystal pitcher and handed me the glass, then sat across from me rather than behind his imposing desk. A lawyer trick, probably, making it feel less formal, more like a conversation between friends. Or maybe he was just a decent man. Robert had trusted him, and Robert had been a good judge of character. Except, apparently, when it came to our son. "I'm going to be direct with you," Daniel said, pulling out a thick folder. "Robert called me 3 months ago and told me to prepare for this exact scenario. He didn't want to believe Gregory would sue you, but he wasn't willing to take chances with your security. He left me a letter," I said. "And some documents. And a sealed envelope he told me not to open until necessary." Daniel nodded slowly. "The sealed envelope. Yes. Robert told me about that. He said if things got really bad, if Gregory pushed this all the way, you'd know when to open it. He said you'd have good instincts about the right moment." "I don't feel like I have good instincts about anything anymore," I admitted. "I didn't even see this coming. I thought I thought Gregory would at least let his father's body get cold before he went after the inheritance. Money changes people, Daniel said quietly. Or maybe it just reveals who they really are. Gregory's lawyer contacted me yesterday. Jennifer Kowalski from Morrison & Associates. She's expensive, which means Gregory and Vanessa are serious about this. They're claiming that Robert wasn't of sound mind when he made his final will, that he was unduly influenced, and that as his biological son, Gregory should receive the estate according to California intestacy laws. Robert was perfectly sane, I said, anger flaring hot in my chest. He was sharp as ever right up until the night he died. I know that. You know that. We have his medical records to prove it. Robert made sure of that too. He had a complete cognitive evaluation done 2 months ago, specifically to establish his mental competence. The man thought of everything. I felt tears prick my eyes. Even dying, Robert had been protecting me. Daniel leaned forward. But here's what you need to understand, Patricia. This isn't really about the law. Legally, you're solid. Robert's will is airtight. His mental competence is documented. His intentions are crystal clear. In a purely legal fight, we'd win. Then why do you sound worried? Because lawsuits aren't always about winning legally. Sometimes they're about pressure. Sometimes they're about making things so painful, so expensive, so emotionally exhausting that the other side gives up. Gregory and Vanessa are banking on you being too grief-stricken, too tired, too intimidated to fight. They think you'll settle. What would settling mean? Probably splitting the estate. Giving them half, $5 million, just to make them go away. $5 million. Half of what Robert had left me. Half of his love, his trust, his life's work. No, I said. I'm not giving them anything. Daniel smiled, and there was approval in his eyes. Good. That's what Robert hoped you'd say. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to fight them on every front. We're going to make this so expensive and so difficult for them that they'll wish they'd never filed. And we're going to win. He opened the folder and started walking me through the strategy. The will was solid, but we'd need to prove Robert's mental competence. We had the medical records for that. We'd need to show that I hadn't unduly influenced him. We had witnesses, including Daniel himself, who'd been present when Robert made his decisions and could testify that I wasn't even in the room, that I hadn't known about the will's contents until after his death. We'd need to document my 42-year marriage, the partnership Robert and I had shared, my role in supporting his success. We'd need character witnesses. We'd need financial records showing that I'd never been motivated by money, that I'd worked my entire life, that I'd never asked Robert for anything extravagant. This is going to get ugly, Daniel warned. Gregory's lawyers will try to paint you as a gold digger. They'll try to suggest you manipulated Robert, isolated him from his son, poisoned their relationship. They'll dig into your past, your marriage, everything. They'll try to make you look bad. Let them try, I said, and I was surprised by the steel in my own voice. I've got nothing to hide. I loved Robert. I was faithful to him for 42 years. I supported him when he had nothing and I loved him just the same when he had everything. They can't change that no matter what they say. What about Gregory? Daniel asked gently. This is going to be brutal for you emotionally. You're going to have to sit in a courtroom and listen to your son testify against you. Listen to him and his wife call you names, make accusations. Are you prepared for that? Was I prepared to hear my son tell a room full of strangers that I was a manipulative, greedy woman who'd stolen his inheritance? Was I prepared to look into his eyes and see nothing but contempt? No. I wasn't prepared for that. You can't prepare for your child to betray you. But I was going to do it anyway. I don't have a choice, I said. If I back down, if I let them win, then Robert died for nothing. Everything he built, everything he wanted for me, it all disappears. And worse than that, it tells them they were right. That I don't deserve respect. That I'm not worth fighting for. I thought about that text message Gregory had sent. Asterisk not personal. Asterisk. Maybe I spent too many years letting people treat me like I didn't matter, I continued. Maybe I let Gregory get away with being cruel because I kept hoping he'd change. Maybe I let Vanessa walk all over me because I was afraid of losing my son completely. But you know what? I've already lost him. This lawsuit proves that. So I've got nothing left to lose by fighting back. Daniel was quiet for a moment, studying me. Then he nodded. Robert told me you were stronger than you looked. He said you'd been carrying the weight of that family for years without anyone noticing. He said when you finally decided to stand up for yourself, Gregory wouldn't know what hit him. Hearing Robert's faith in me, even secondhand, even after his death, gave me strength I didn't know I had. What do I need to do? I asked. For the next 2 hours, Daniel walked me through everything. We'd need depositions. We'd need to gather documents, financial records, photographs, letters, anything that showed the reality of my marriage and my relationship with Gregory. We'd need witnesses who could speak to my character and to Robert's state of mind. What about the sealed envelope? I asked as we were wrapping up. Daniel's expression became serious. That's your nuclear option. Robert was very clear about it. He said inside that envelope is information that would end this lawsuit immediately. But he also said it would end your relationship with Gregory permanently. Completely. No going back. Our relationship is already over, I said bitterly. Maybe. But right now, you can tell yourself Gregory is just misguided. That Vanessa is manipulating him. That maybe, someday, he'll realize what is done and come back to you. If you open that envelope and use what's inside, that door closes forever. You need to be absolutely certain before you go down that road. I thought about the little boy who'd brought me dandelions. About the teenager who'd hugged me at graduation. About all the years I'd spent hoping to get that person back. I'll save it for if we really need it, I said finally. But I'm not afraid to use it. Daniel nodded. Fair enough. For now, let's focus on building our case the conventional way. The hearing is in 6 weeks. That's not a lot of time, but it's enough if we work hard. I left his office with a thick folder of homework, documents to find, questions to answer, names of people to contact for potential testimony. My head was spinning. My heart was heavy. But underneath it all, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. I drove home through Los Angeles traffic, watching the city Robert and I had made our own. 45 years I'd lived here. 45 years of struggling and surviving and eventually thriving. This was my city too. My life. My story. And I wasn't going to let Gregory and Vanessa write the ending. When I got home, I spread all of Daniel's documents across the dining room table. I made a pot of strong coffee. I put on my reading glasses, the cheap ones from the drugstore that Robert used to tease me about, and I got to work. Financial records first. I pulled out bank statements going back years. Joint accounts that Robert and I had shared. Records of the small paycheck I'd brought in from my part-time job at the library where I'd worked for the last 15 years. Evidence that I'd always contributed, always worked, always pulled my weight even after Robert became successful and I could have stopped. Then photographs. I had boxes of them, decades worth. Robert and me on our wedding day at City Hall, both of us so young and hopeful. Gregory as a baby, me holding him in the hospital, my face full of pure love. Birthday parties and Christmases and ordinary moments. Robert and me on our 20th anniversary, our 30th, our 40th. Always together. Always smiling. Always in love. I found letters Robert had written me over the years. He wasn't usually much for words, he showed his love through actions, but every now and then he'd leave me a note. One from our 5th anniversary, * thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. * one from when Gregory was born. * you've made me the happiest man alive. * one from our 30th anniversary. * 40 more years wouldn't be enough. * By midnight, I had the dining room table covered with the evidence of my life. My real life. Not the version Gregory and Vanessa were going to tell in court, but the truth. I was exhausted. My eyes hurt. My back ached from hours of sitting and sorting. But I also felt something else. If you've stuck with me this far, if you're still listening, then do something for me. Hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. And check that description box below for more stories about people who refused to stay quiet when the world tried to silence them. Because that's what this was really about. Not money. Not inheritance law. Not even revenge, though I won't lie and say that wasn't part of it. It was about refusing to be erased. It was about looking at the people who'd tried to make me invisible and saying, no. You don't get to decide my worth. You don't get to dismiss my life. You don't get to pretend I didn't matter. I mattered to Robert. I'd mattered to the man who'd built an empire and chose to leave it all to me because he trusted me, because he loved me, because our 42 years together meant something. And if I had to walk into a courtroom and prove that to a judge, to a room full of strangers, to my own son who'd forgotten how to love me, then that's exactly what I'd do. I gathered up the photos and letters carefully, putting them back in their folders. I'd need to make copies, Daniel had said. Document everything. Build the case piece by piece. As I was organizing everything, my phone rang. It was late, after midnight. My heart jumped. Late-night calls never meant anything good. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. Patricia Westfield. A woman's voice, older than the lawyer who'd called before, with a warmth that surprised me. Yes. My name is Helen Morrison. I'm the senior partner at Morrison & Associates, the firm representing your son. My blood went cold. I have an attorney. You should talk to him. I know, and I will. But I wanted to call you personally, woman to woman. Off the record. She paused. I've been a lawyer for 37 years, Patricia. I've handled hundreds of estate disputes. And I've learned to recognize when I'm on the wrong side of a case. I sat down slowly. What are you saying? I'm saying Jennifer Kowalski is a junior associate who took this case because your daughter-in-law is very persuasive and very aggressive. I'm saying I reviewed the file tonight and I saw Robert's will, his medical documentation, the evidence of your marriage. I saw a good man protecting his wife. And I saw a son who's making a terrible mistake. Then why are you representing him? Because he's paying us. Because technically he has a right to contest the will even if morally he's wrong. Because that's how the law works. She sighed. But I wanted you to know that you're going to win this, Patricia. You have to fight it. We'll make you fight it because that's what Gregory is paying us to do, but you're going to win. Robert made sure of that. Why are you telling me this? Because I have a son too, Helen said quietly. And I hope to God he never treats me the way Gregory is treating you. I've watched this firm destroy families over money for decades, and I'm tired of it. I can't drop the case without cause, but I can tell you the truth, your son is wrong. His wife is driving this. And when it's over and you've won, he's going to have to live with what he did to you. My throat was tight. Thank you, I managed. Don't thank me. I'm still going to fight you in court. But I wanted you to know that someone on the other side sees you, sees what you've been through, and respects you for standing up for yourself. She paused. One more thing. Your husband was a brilliant man. Whatever he prepared for you, whatever contingencies he set up, trust them. Trust him. He knew what he was doing. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there in the dark dining room, surrounded by the evidence of my life, holding my phone and trying to process what had just happened. The lawyer representing my son had called to tell me I was going to win. To tell me I was right. It should have made me feel better. Instead, it made me feel heartbroken all over again. Because it meant there was no confusion. No legal complexity. No gray area where Gregory might actually have a legitimate claim. It meant my son was simply, clearly, deliberately trying to steal from me. Trying to erase my marriage and my worth because his wife wanted money and he'd become the kind of man who'd do anything she asked. I went to bed that night and dreamed of dandelions. The next 6 weeks were the hardest of my life, and I'd already lived through poverty, loss, and burying the man I loved. Legal discovery, Daniel explained, was when both sides exchanged information. They got to ask me questions, written questions called interrogatories that I had to answer under oath. They got to demand documents. They got to schedule a deposition where I'd have to sit in a room with their lawyer and answer questions for hours while everything was recorded. And we got to do the same to Gregory. The interrogatories from Gregory's lawyers arrived in a thick envelope. 73 questions. Each one designed to humiliate me, to paint me as a gold digger, to suggest I'd manipulated Robert. Asterisk question 15. Describe in detail all instances in which you asked Robert Westfield for money, gifts, or financial support during your marriage. Asterisk. Asterisk question 28. List all occasions on which you were alone with Robert Westfield during the 6 months prior to his death. Asterisk. Asterisk question 41. Describe your relationship with Robert Westfield's son, including any conflicts or disagreements. Asterisk. That last one nearly broke me. Any conflicts or disagreements with Gregory. Like our relationship could be reduced to a list of arguments, as if the decades of love and sacrifice didn't matter at all. Daniel helped me answer them, carefully, truthfully. We documented that I'd worked throughout our marriage. That I'd never asked Robert for anything extravagant. That I'd been with him constantly in his final months not because I was isolating him, but because he was my husband and I loved him and he was dying, even if we didn't know it yet. The question about Gregory took me 3 days to answer. I rewrote it a dozen times, trying to be honest without being cruel, trying to explain how my son had drifted away without making myself sound like a bitter, rejected mother. In the end, I just told the truth, that I loved my son, that I tried to maintain a relationship with him, that he'd gradually stopped visiting and calling, and that his wife had made it clear she considered me beneath her family's social status. I documented the missed holidays, the cancelled visits, the years of slow abandonment. It hurt to write it down. To see it in black and white. To face how completely Gregory had erased me from his life long before Robert died. Then came my deposition. Daniel prepared me for 3 days. He asked me every possible question the other side might ask. He taught me to pause before answering, to think carefully, to say only what was necessary. He warned me that Jennifer Kowalski would try to provoke me, to make me angry or emotional, to get me to say something that could be used against me. Stay calm, he said. Stay dignified. Remember that everything you say is being recorded. Every expression on your face, every tone in your voice, they'll use it all. The deposition was in a conference room at Morrison & Associates. I wore my best dress, nothing fancy, just a simple navy blue dress that Robert had always said made me look elegant. I kept my hair in its usual bun. I wore minimal makeup. I wanted to look exactly like what I was, a 67-year-old widow who had nothing to hide. Jennifer Kowalski was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and a sharper suit. She smiled at me when I entered, but it didn't reach her eyes. Mrs. Westfield, thank you for being here today. Let's begin. For 5 hours, she asked me questions. About my marriage. About Robert's death. About our finances. About Gregory. She asked about my education. I'd graduated high school but never went to college. She asked about my work history, decades of service jobs, nothing prestigious. She asked how I'd met Robert, at a bus stop in the rain, both of us broke and struggling. She was trying to paint a picture. Young woman with no education meets slightly older man with potential. Latches onto him. Rides his success. Manipulates him into leaving her everything. But the facts didn't support that story, and I could see her frustration growing as the hours passed. Yes, I'd met Robert when we were both poor. But I'd married him when he was still poor. I'd worked alongside him for decades before he became successful. I'd never asked him for anything. I'd kept working even after we didn't need the money, because I liked having my own purpose, my own identity. Let's talk about your relationship with Gregory, Jennifer finally said, and I felt my stomach tighten. What would you like to know? When did you last see your son before your husband's death? At Robert's 70th birthday party. 2 years ago. 2 years. She looked up, surprised. You didn't see your son for 2 years before your husband passed away. That's correct. Whose choice was that? I met her eyes. Gregory's. And his wife's. They stopped visiting. Stopped calling. I tried to maintain contact, but they were always too busy. Did you and Robert ever discuss why Gregory was distant? Yes. And what did you conclude? I paused, choosing my words carefully. We concluded that Gregory's wife came from a different background than we did. That she was uncomfortable with our working-class roots. And that Gregory had adopted her perspective. That's speculation, Mrs. Westfield. Do you have any actual evidence that Vanessa Westfield influenced your son's behavior? She told me at their first family dinner that our home was quaint. She refused to eat the meal I'd spent all day cooking. She talked about her family's vacation homes and her parents' connections while making it clear she considered us beneath her. Over the next 8 years, every time they cancelled a visit or declined an invitation, it was Vanessa who made the excuses. Every time I called, she answered and said Gregory was busy. Every time. That's enough, Jennifer interrupted. You're claiming your daughter-in-law deliberately isolated your son from you. I'm stating facts, I said calmly. You asked me to describe what happened. That's what happened. She changed tactics. Did Robert ever express any concerns about Gregory's character? My heart clenched. This was dangerous territory. If I said yes, They'd claim Robert was biased against Gregory and that's why he left me everything. If I said no, I'd be lying. Robert loved Gregory very much, I said carefully. But he was disappointed by some of Gregory's choices in recent years. What choices specifically? I thought about the letter Robert had left me. About Gregory asking for $500,000 for a cryptocurrency scheme. About the threats he'd made. But Daniel had advised me not to reveal everything in the deposition. Save some ammunition for trial. Gregory became very focused on money and status, I said. It worried Robert. But he kept hoping Gregory would remember the values we'd tried to teach him. Jennifer asked dozens more questions, probing, pushing, trying to find something she could use. But there was nothing to find. I'd lived my life honestly. I'd loved my husband faithfully. I'd tried to be a good mother even when my son had rejected me. The truth was boring from a legal standpoint. There was no scandal, no secret, no smoking gun that would support their case. When it was finally over, Daniel walked me to my car. You did great, he said. You stayed calm, you told the truth, you didn't let her provoke you. They've got nothing, Patricia. Then why am I shaking? Because it's traumatic, he said gently. Because you just spent 5 hours being interrogated about your marriage, your worth, your life. That takes a toll. Go home. Rest. Tomorrow we depose Gregory. Gregory's deposition. I'd been both dreading it and anticipating it. I wouldn't be allowed in the room. Daniel explained that parties to a lawsuit typically weren't present for opposing depositions. But he'd tell me everything afterward. And we'd get a transcript. The next day felt endless. I tried to keep busy. I cleaned the house, not that it needed it, but I needed something to do with my hands, something to focus on besides imagining what Gregory was saying about me in that conference room. Daniel called me at 6 that evening. Well, he said, and I couldn't read his tone. That was illuminating. Tell me. Gregory's story is that Robert became increasingly isolated in his final years. That you monitored his calls and visits. That you convinced Robert that Gregory was only interested in his money. That you manipulated Robert into cutting Gregory out of the will because you wanted to punish Gregory for not visiting enough. Each accusation was like a physical blow. That's not true. None of that is true. I know. And here's the problem for them. Gregory couldn't provide any actual evidence. When I asked him to describe specific instances of you monitoring Robert's calls, he couldn't. When I asked him to produce emails or texts where Robert expressed concerns about being isolated, he didn't have any. When I asked him why he hadn't visited his father in 2 years, he got defensive and blamed you for making it uncomfortable. How did I make it uncomfortable? According to Gregory, you were always guilt-tripping him about not visiting. You'd make comments about how lonely Robert was. You'd ask why they never came for holidays. Apparently, that constituted emotional manipulation that justified cutting you out of his life. Daniel's voice was dry with sarcasm. I was telling him the truth, I said. Robert was lonely for his son. I was lonely for my son. Was I supposed to pretend everything was fine? Of course not. And that's exactly what I told them. A mother asking her son to visit is not manipulation. It's normal. The fact that Gregory felt guilty about not visiting doesn't mean you were guilt-tripping him. It means he knew he was behaving badly. What about Vanessa? She was there for his deposition, sitting right beside him, answering questions he should have been able to answer himself. At one point, when I asked Gregory what his father did for a living, he looked at Vanessa before answering. His own father, Patricia. He had to check with his wife before describing Robert's career. I closed my eyes, pain radiating through my chest. He's completely under her control. It appears that way. But here's what you need to know, their case is falling apart. They have no evidence of undue influence. They have no evidence that Robert wasn't of sound mind. They have no evidence that his will didn't reflect his true wishes. All they have is speculation and hurt feelings. So we're going to win. In court. Almost certainly. But Patricia. He paused. There's something else. Something Gregory said during the deposition. When I asked him what he thought his relationship with you would be like after this lawsuit, he said, and I quote, "There won't be a relationship. That's the point." The words hit me like ice water. He wants to cut me out of his life permanently, I whispered. I'm sorry, Daniel said. I thought you should know. After we hung up, I sat in the dark living room for a long time. The house was so quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like grief has substance, like you could reach out and touch it. My son wanted to erase me. Not just from Robert's will, but from his life entirely. This lawsuit wasn't about money, not really. It was about making it official. Making it legal. Declaring in a court of law that I didn't matter, didn't deserve anything, wasn't really his mother in any way that counted. I thought about that sealed envelope in Robert's desk. The nuclear option. The information that would end the lawsuit immediately but also end any chance of reconciliation forever. Was there still a chance? After everything Gregory had done, everything he'd said, could there still be a way back? I went to Robert's study and pulled out the envelope. It was heavier than I remembered. I held it in my hands, feeling the weight of whatever secrets it contained. Not yet, I decided. We were winning the conventional way. I didn't need to use Robert's nuclear option. Not yet. But I was running out of reasons not to. The day of the hearing arrived with brilliant California sunshine, the kind of perfect weather that felt like mockery. The sky had no right to be that blue when my world was this dark. I dressed carefully that morning. The same navy dress from the deposition. Simple pearl earrings Robert had given me for our 30th anniversary. Low heels that wouldn't make me taller than I was. I'd learned long ago that taking up less space made people underestimate you, and today, I wanted to be underestimated. Daniel picked me up at 8. The hearing was scheduled for 10, but he wanted to arrive early, get me settled, go over everything one more time. How are you feeling? He asked as we drove through downtown Los Angeles traffic. Terrified, I admitted. I'm going to see Gregory for the first time since Robert's funeral. I'm going to have to sit there while he tries to destroy me. He's not going to destroy you, Daniel said firmly. We've got this, Patricia. Their case is weak. Our evidence is strong. Judge Morrison is fair and thorough. We're going to be fine. Judge Morrison. I'd Googled him after we got the hearing assignment. Judge Theodore Morrison, appointed to the bench 15 years ago, known for being meticulous and no-nonsense. His photograph showed a black man in his early 60s with kind eyes and a serious expression. I tried to imagine standing before him, explaining my life, asking him to believe that I'd earned my husband's love and trust. Asking him to see me as more than just some old woman trying to keep money from her son. The courthouse was massive, all concrete and glass. Security lines. Metal detectors. Crowds of people with briefcases and worried faces. I felt small and lost and completely out of place. Daniel guided me through it all with practiced ease. We took an elevator to the 5th floor. The hallway outside the courtroom was lined with benches where people waited, their faces tense with pretrial anxiety. And then I saw them. Gregory and Vanessa. They were at the far end of the hallway, standing with Jennifer Kowalski and another lawyer I didn't recognize. Gregory wore an expensive suit, his hair perfectly styled. He looked successful, confident, like someone who belonged in places like this. Vanessa stood beside him in designer everything, a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my car, her highlighted hair falling in perfect waves, her makeup flawless. She had her hand on Gregory's arm, possessive, supportive. The perfect wife standing by her husband. They were talking to their lawyers, heads bent together in conference. They hadn't seen me yet. I stared at my son, this man I'd given birth to, raised, loved unconditionally for 38 years. I tried to see the little boy in his features, the child who'd hugged me and called me Mama and believed I could fix anything. But all I saw was a stranger. Patricia. Daniel's voice was gentle. Do you want to wait in the conference room until they call us? No, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. I'm not hiding from my own son. We walked down the hallway toward the courtroom. We'd have to pass right by them. I kept my head up, my shoulders back. I thought about Robert's letter. Asterisk, don't let them make you feel small. You were never small to me. Asterisk. Gregory looked up as we approached. Our eyes met. For just a second, less than a second, I saw something flicker across his face. Surprise, maybe. Or discomfort. Or could it possibly have been guilt? Then Vanessa whispered something in his ear, and his expression hardened into cold contempt. He looked away. Deliberately. Dismissively. Like I was beneath his notice. I kept walking. Past them. Past their lawyers. Into the courtroom. My hands were shaking, but I didn't let it show. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected from television. Wood paneling. Fluorescent lights. Rows of benches like church pews. The judge's bench at the front, elevated, imposing. The American flag and the California state flag standing guard on either side. Daniel led me to a table on the left side. We Saturday. He pulled out files and documents, organizing everything with calm efficiency. Gregory, Vanessa, and their lawyers took the table on the right side. We sat maybe 15 feet apart. Close enough that I could hear Vanessa's whispered comments to Gregory. Close enough that I could see Jennifer Kowalski reviewing her notes. Close enough that the distance between us felt like a chasm I'd never be able to cross. Other people filtered into the courtroom. A court reporter. A bailiff. A few observers, law students maybe, or people with other cases waiting their turn. At exactly 10 o'clock, the bailiff stood. All rise. The Superior Court of Los Angeles County is now in session, the Honorable Judge Theodore Morrison presiding. We all stood. The door behind the bench opened, and Judge Morrison entered. He was taller than I'd expected from his photograph, with a commanding presence that immediately made the room feel smaller. He wore his black robes with an air of authority earned over years on the bench. His expression was neutral, professional, giving nothing away. He took his seat. Please be seated. We Saturday. Judge Morrison looked down at the papers before him, then up at both tables. His gaze swept over our side first, Daniel, me, the evidence of our case organized in neat folders. Then his gaze moved to the other side. He looked at Jennifer Kowalski, at her co-counsel, at Vanessa, and then his eyes landed on Gregory. He stared for a long moment. Long enough that I noticed. Long enough that Gregory shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Interesting, Judge Morrison said quietly, almost to himself. Then his eyes moved to me. And something happened that I didn't understand. The judge's expression changed. The professional neutrality cracked, just for a second. His eyes widened slightly. He leaned forward in his chair, studying me intently. Mrs. Patricia Westfield, he asked, his voice strange, uncertain in a way judges shouldn't sound. Yes, Your Honor, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He was quiet for a moment that stretched too long, staring at me like he was trying to solve a puzzle, like he was seeing something that shouldn't be possible. Then he did something completely unexpected. He stood up. A judge, in the middle of a hearing, stood up from his bench and stared down at me with an expression I couldn't read. Shock. Recognition. Something else. Wait, he said, and his voice had lost all of its professional distance. Wait. You're Patricia Holloway? From Henderson, Nevada. The courtroom went completely silent. Even the court reporter stopped typing. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Henderson, Nevada. My hometown. The trailer park where I'd grown up. A name I hadn't used in over 40 years. How did Judge Theodore Morrison know that name? Yes, I managed. That was my maiden name. How do you? Oh my God, he breathed, and sat back down heavily in his chair. He was gripping the edge of his bench like he needed to steady himself. Patricia. It's me. It's Teddy. Teddy Morrison. We went to Henderson High together. The world tilted. Teddy Morrison. A name I hadn't heard in decades. A face I barely remembered, buried under years of life and loss and moving forward. But as I stared at him, really looked at him, I started to see it. The boy underneath the man. The teenager I'd known a lifetime ago. Teddy. I whispered. Across the room, I heard Vanessa's sharp intake of breath. Heard Gregory's confused "what's happening?" Heard Jennifer Kowalski frantically whispering to her co-counsel. Judge Morrison, Teddy Morrison, was shaking his head in disbelief, a smile breaking across his professional face. I can't believe this. Patricia Holloway. After all these years. You married Robert Westfield. He looked down at the case file, understanding dawning. The Robert Westfield? The real estate investor. You knew Robert. I was so confused, my mind racing to make connections that didn't make sense. I met him once, years ago, at a fundraiser. He mentioned his wife's name was Patricia, but there are thousands of Patricias. I never imagined. He trailed off, then seemed to remember where he was. His expression shifted, the judge reasserting control. This is highly irregular. I need to disclose a potential conflict of interest. Mrs. Westfield and I attended high school together over 50 years ago. Daniel was on his feet. Your Honor, may we approach? Please. Both legal teams approached the bench. I stayed seated, my mind reeling. The courtroom observers were whispering to each other, sensing drama. Gregory was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Confusion. Suspicion. And something else. Fear. Maybe. Like the foundation of his case was crumbling beneath him and he didn't understand why. Vanessa looked furious. At the bench, there was intense whispered conversation. I couldn't hear most of it, but I caught fragments. How well did you know her? High school, not close, but potential bias. Could recuse myself. Then Daniel's voice, clearer. Your Honor, my client had no idea you'd be presiding over this case. There was no impropriety. But if you feel you should recuse yourself, we'll accept that. Jennifer Kowalski jumped in. Your Honor, the defendants request that you recuse yourself immediately. This is clearly a conflict of interest. But Judge Morrison was shaking his head. I don't believe it rises to that level. Mrs. Westfield and I were acquaintances in high school over 50 years ago. We haven't had any contact since then. I have no personal interest in the outcome of this case beyond ensuring justice is served. He paused. However, I will make a disclosure on the record, and both parties will have the opportunity to object. They returned to their tables. The judge spoke formally now, for the record. This court notes that I attended Henderson High School in Henderson, Nevada from 1976 to 1980, during which time I was acquainted with the respondent, Patricia Westfield, née Holloway. We were classmates but not close friends. We have had no contact in the subsequent 45 years. I do not believe this acquaintance creates a conflict of interest that would prevent me from fairly adjudicating this case. However, both parties have the right to request that I recuse myself. Does the petitioner wish to make such a request? Jennifer Kowalski huddled with Gregory and Vanessa. I could see Vanessa's mouth moving rapidly, her face red with anger. Gregory looked uncertain. Finally, Jennifer stood. Your Honor, the petitioner requests that you recuse yourself based on your prior relationship with the respondent. Judge Morrison nodded. Does the respondent have a position on this request? Daniel stood. Your Honor, the respondent trusts in your impartiality and does not request recusal. However, we will abide by whatever decision you make. The judge was quiet for a moment, considering. Then, request denied. As I stated, Mrs. Westfield and I were casual acquaintances half a century ago. That does not create a conflict of interest. This hearing will proceed. However, I will ensure that my rulings are thoroughly documented and that all parties receive a fair hearing. He banged his gavel. Let's continue. Ms. Kowalski, your opening statement. But the damage was done. The dynamic in the room had completely shifted. Because Gregory and Vanessa had walked into this courtroom expecting to face down a helpless old woman with no connections, no power, no one to speak for her. Instead, they just discovered that the judge presiding over their case knew me, had gone to school with me, had smiled when he saw me. I could see the calculations running behind Vanessa's eyes. The suspicions. The paranoia. Had I known? Had I arranged this somehow? Was the fix in? The answer to all of those questions was no. I'd had no idea. It was pure coincidence, the kind of random connection that happens in life sometimes, especially when you've lived in the same city for 45 years. But they didn't know that. And the uncertainty was eating them alive. As Jennifer Kowalski began her opening statement, trying to paint me as a manipulative gold digger who'd isolated Robert and stolen Gregory's inheritance, I noticed her confidence was shaken. She kept glancing at the judge, trying to gauge his reaction. And Judge Morrison, Teddy Morrison, the boy from Henderson High who I barely remembered, maintained perfect professional neutrality. But every now and then, his eyes would flick to me. And in those brief glances, I saw something that gave me strength. He saw me, not just as a party in a case, but as a person. As Patricia Holloway, the girl who'd grown up in a trailer park and made something of her life. He saw me in a way my own son refused to. And that changed everything. During the mid-morning recess, Daniel pulled me aside into a small conference room down the hall from the courtroom. Patricia, he said, his eyes bright with barely contained excitement. Do you understand what just happened in there? I went to high school with the judge, I said, still trying to process it myself. 50 years ago. I barely even remember him. But he remembers you. And more importantly, Gregory and Vanessa think you somehow arranged this. They think the fix is in. Did you see Vanessa's face? She looked like she wanted to explode. I didn't arrange anything, I protested. I didn't even know Teddy, Judge Morrison, was in Los Angeles. I didn't know he'd become a lawyer, let alone a judge. Daniel, I haven't thought about Henderson High School in decades. I know that. You know that. But they don't know that. And that uncertainty is going to eat at them for the rest of this hearing. He grinned. This is the best thing that could have happened to us. But what if they're right to request recusal? What if the judge really is biased now? Daniel shook his head. The judge is a professional. He's not going to rule in your favor just because you went to high school together 50 years ago. But what will happen is that he'll be extra careful to be fair, to document everything, to make sure his rulings are beyond reproach. And when he rules in our favor, which he will, because we have the better case, there will be no grounds for appeal based on bias. I sat down heavily in one of the conference room chairs. My mind was spinning, tumbling backward through time to a version of myself I'd almost forgotten existed. Patricia Holloway. Henderson, Nevada. 1976 to 1980. I'd been so young. So poor. So desperate to escape the life I'd been born into. Daniel, I said slowly, can I tell you something? About Henderson? About who I was back then? Of course. I took a deep breath, gathering memories I'd buried for decades. I grew up in Desert Valley Trailer Park. Do you know what that means? We're not talking about a nice mobile home community. We're talking about rusted trailers with broken windows, held together with duct tape and prayers. We're talking about no air conditioning in Nevada summers, space heaters that barely worked in winter, and neighbors who screamed at each other every night. Patricia. No, let me finish. You need to understand who I was. My mother worked 3 jobs, cleaning houses during the day, waitressing at night, weekend shifts at a convenience store. I barely saw her. When I did see her, she was exhausted, worn down to nothing. She died when I was 23. Worked herself to death trying to keep us fed. My voice cracked, but I kept going. I was the scholarship kid at Henderson High. The one wearing the same 3 outfits rotated through the week. The one who couldn't afford class trips or yearbooks or prom dresses. The one who brought lunch from home in a paper bag while everyone else bought food in the cafeteria. Did you know Judge Morrison back then? Daniel asked gently. Barely. I tried to remember. He was. God, what was he? I think he was in my English class junior year. And maybe biology. He was smart. Really smart. But quiet. Not part of the popular crowd, but not an outcast either. Just there. We probably had a dozen conversations total in 4 years. Do you remember anything specific? I closed my eyes, reaching back through the decades. Fragments of memory, dusty and faded. He was kind, I said finally. I remember that. Once, in English class, we were reading The Great Gatsby. The teacher asked what the green light symbolized, and I said something about hope and the American dream. Most of the other kids rolled their eyes. I was always too serious, too earnest. But Teddy Morrison nodded and added to my answer. Supported it. Made it seem less stupid. That's it. That's all you remember. There was one other thing. The memory was surfacing now, clear and sharp. Senior year. The week before graduation. I was sitting outside the school, crying. My mother had just told me that even with my scholarship to community college, she couldn't help with expenses. She didn't have anything extra. And I'd worked so hard, gotten straight A's, done everything right, but it still wasn't enough. I could see it so clearly now, 17-year-old Patricia Holloway, sitting on a bench outside Henderson High, feeling like all her dreams were crumbling. Teddy walked by. He saw me crying and stopped. Asked if I was okay. I lied and said I was fine, but he didn't believe me. He sat down next to me, and we just sat there for a while, not talking. Then he said something I never forgot. What did he say? He said, "My father tells me that the world tries to make you small. That when you come from nothing, people expect you to stay nothing. But you don't have to accept that. You can build yourself into something they never imagined. Then he smiled at me and said, "You're going to do great things, Patricia Holloway. I can tell." I opened my eyes, tears streaming down my face. That was the last time I talked to him. We graduated. I went to LA and met Robert a few months later. I never went back to Henderson. I never saw Teddy Morrison again. Until today, Daniel said softly. Until today. I wiped my eyes. God, Daniel. He remembered me. After 50 years, he remembered my name. People remember kindness, Daniel said. Even after decades. You were kind to each other in a place that wasn't always kind. That matters. There was a knock on the conference room door. The bailiff stuck his head in. 5 minutes until we reconvene. Daniel helped me gather my things. As we walked back toward the courtroom, he put a hand on my arm. "Patricia, I need to ask you something. That sealed envelope Robert left you. Do you think what's inside has anything to do with Henderson? With your past?" I stopped walking. I don't know. Robert knew where I came from. He knew about the trailer park, about my mother, about how hard it was. But why would he put something about that in a sealed envelope? Maybe it's not about Henderson specifically. Maybe it's about who you really are. Where you came from. Who you've always been. Daniel's expression was thoughtful. Gregory has spent this entire lawsuit trying to paint you as some nobody who manipulated his father. But what if Robert left you evidence that you're not a nobody? That you never were? Before I could respond, we were back at the courtroom doors. Gregory and Vanessa were already inside, huddled with their lawyers. When I entered, Vanessa's eyes tracked me with open hostility. Judge Morrison entered promptly. "All rise." We rose, sat, and the hearing continued. Daniel's opening statement was masterful. He laid out our case clearly and simply. A 42-year marriage built on mutual love and respect. A husband who'd built wealth through his own hard work and chose to leave it to the wife who'd stood beside him every step of the way. A son who'd distanced himself from his parents for years and was now trying to claim he deserved an inheritance he'd never earned, from a man he'd barely visited, based solely on biological connection. "Your Honor," Daniel concluded, "this case is fundamentally about whether 42 years of partnership, love, and support count for something. Whether a wife who worked alongside her husband, who supported his dreams, who loved him when he had nothing and loved him just the same when he had everything. Whether that woman deserves to be honored by the final wishes of the man she devoted her life to. Or whether biology alone should trump everything else." It was powerful. Even I felt moved by it, and I'd lived every word. Then it was time for testimony. Jennifer Kowalski called Gregory to the stand first. I watched my son walk to the witness stand, raise his right hand, swear to tell the truth. He looked confident, professional. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept darting to the judge and then away. Jennifer led him through his testimony. He described growing up as Robert Westfield's only son. The relationship he'd had with his father, carefully edited, I noticed, to remove all the parts where he'd ignored us for years. He talked about being shocked when he learned the will left everything to me. "In your opinion," Jennifer asked, "did your father intend to disinherit you?" "No," Gregory said firmly. "My father loved me. He would have wanted me to have his estate. I'm his son. His heir. I think he was manipulated during a vulnerable time." "Objection," Daniel said calmly. "Speculation. The witness is not qualified to testify about Robert Westfield's mental state or intentions." "Sustained," Judge Morrison said. His tone was perfectly neutral. "The witness will stick to facts he directly observed." Jennifer tried again. "Did you observe your stepmother engaging in any behavior that seemed designed to isolate your father?" "She wasn't my stepmother," Gregory said, and there was venom in his voice. "She was my father's second wife. And yes, she constantly made my father feel guilty about our relationship. Every conversation became about how we didn't visit enough, didn't call enough. She drove a wedge between us. I felt like I'd been slapped. That's what he believed. That I'd driven the wedge." Daniel stood for cross-examination. He was gentle at first, almost friendly. "Mr. Westfield, when was the last time you visited your father before his death?" Gregory shifted. "I'm not sure exactly." "Let me help you." According to the calendar and photographs we've submitted as evidence, it was your father's 70th birthday party. April 15th, 2 years ago. Does that sound right? If you say so. 2 years. In 2 years, you never visited your father. Not once. I was busy. I have a demanding career. Of course. And how many phone calls did you have with your father during those 2 years? Gregory's jaw tightened. I don't recall exactly. The phone records show 7 calls. 7 calls in 2 years. Most lasting less than 10 minutes. Does that sound right? My father could have called me. He did call you, Daniel said, pulling out a document. Phone records show Robert Westfield called your number 43 times during those 2 years. Most of those calls went to voicemail. Of the ones you answered, most lasted less than 5 minutes. Would you agree that your father was attempting to maintain contact with you? I was busy, Gregory repeated. Too busy for your dying father. Objection. Jennifer was on her feet. Robert Westfield's death was sudden and unexpected. There was no indication he was dying. Withdrawn, Daniel said smoothly. Let me rephrase. Were you too busy to maintain a relationship with your elderly father during the last 2 years of his life? Gregory's face flushed red. You're twisting things. My relationship with my father was complicated because of her. He pointed at me. She made him choose between us. Really? Can you describe a single specific instance in which Mrs. Westfield explicitly asked your father to choose between you? Silence. Mr. Westfield. It was subtle. The way she'd sigh when we couldn't make it for holidays. The comments about how lonely my father was. So your stepmother told you the truth, that your father missed you and was lonely, and you interpreted that as manipulation. It was the way she said it. The way she said it. Daniel let that hang in the air for a moment. Mr. Westfield, did you attend your father's funeral? Of course. And did you speak with Mrs. Westfield at the funeral? Gregory hesitated. Briefly. What did you say to her? I don't remember. Let me refresh your memory. According to 3 witnesses we've deposed, you shook her hand at the funeral, not a hug, a handshake, said sorry for your loss, and then left with your wife without attending the reception. Is that accurate? I suppose. Your father had just died. Your stepmother, the woman who'd been married to your father for 42 years, had just lost her husband. And you gave her a handshake and left. Would you say that demonstrates a close, loving family relationship? Objection, Jennifer said. Argumentative. Sustained. But the point had been made. The entire courtroom had seen it. Gregory's close relationship with his father was a fiction. He'd abandoned us years ago. Daniel continued the cross-examination for another 30 minutes, systematically dismantling Gregory's claims. He produced evidence of the missed holidays, the declined invitations, the increasingly distant relationship. He showed that Robert had tried repeatedly to maintain contact with Gregory, and Gregory had consistently rebuffed him. One final question, Mr. Westfield. When did you first decide to contest your father's will? When I learned that he'd left everything to her and cut me out completely. And when did you learn that? About 2 days after the funeral. 2 days. And how long after learning about the will did you contact an attorney? Gregory's eyes slid to Vanessa. I'm not sure. Maybe a week. Actually, Daniel said, pulling out another document, according to the retainer agreement with Morrison and Associates, you retained Jennifer Kowalski's services 3 days after the funeral. 3 days after your father was buried, you were already preparing to sue your stepmother. Is that correct? I was protecting my rights. 3 days after burying your father, while your stepmother was grieving, you were preparing a lawsuit. No further questions. Gregory left the stand looking shaken. Vanessa immediately grabbed his hand, whispering furiously in his ear. Jennifer called Vanessa next. My daughter-in-law took the stand like she was walking a runway, confident, poised, beautiful in her expensive suit. She smiled at the judge, but Judge Morrison's expression remained professionally neutral. Vanessa's testimony was predictable. She described me as cold and manipulative. She claimed I'd always resented Gregory, always seen him as competition for Robert's affection and resources. She said I'd deliberately made them feel unwelcome in our home, had turned Robert against his only son. It was all lies, but she told them beautifully. She was convincing. If I didn't know the truth, I might have believed her myself. Then Daniel stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Westfield, you've painted quite a picture of Patricia Westfield as a manipulative woman. How long have you known her? 8 years. And in those 8 years, how many times have you visited the Westfield home? Vanessa blinked. I'm not sure exactly. Let me help you. According to the calendar evidence we've submitted, you and Gregory visited the Westfield home exactly 12 times in 8 years. Does that sound right? If you say so. 12 visits in 8 years. That's an average of 1.5 visits per year. Would you say that's enough time to truly know someone's character? I saw enough. What did you see? Can you describe specific behaviors that led you to believe Mrs. Westfield was manipulative? Vanessa launched into a story about the first dinner at our house. How I'd made pot roast even though she'd mentioned she was trying to eat healthy. How I'd decorated with flowers she was allergic to. How I'd asked invasive questions about her family. Daniel listened patiently. Then, Mrs. Westfield, did you tell Patricia in advance that you were trying to eat healthy? I mentioned it to Gregory. But not to Patricia directly. I assumed he'd tell her. Did you tell Patricia in advance that you're allergic to certain flowers? No, but... So Patricia couldn't have known. She cooked a meal her son used to love, decorated her home beautifully, and tried to get to know her son's girlfriend. And you interpreted this as, what? Hostility. It was the way she did it, Vanessa said, echoing Gregory's earlier words. She was trying too hard. It felt fake. Or perhaps, Daniel said quietly, she was trying to make you feel welcome. Trying to build a relationship with the woman her son loved. And you rejected those efforts because you'd already decided Patricia Westfield wasn't good enough for your family. That's not true. No? Tell me about your parents, Mrs. Westfield. What do they do? My father is a venture capitalist. My mother is on several non-profit boards. They're wealthy. They're successful. And Patricia Westfield grew up in a trailer park in Nevada. Her mother cleaned houses for a living. Patricia herself worked as a waitress, a house cleaner, various service jobs. Would you say that's the same social class as your family? Objection. Jennifer was on her feet. Relevance. Your Honor, the witness has testified about Patricia Westfield's character. I'm establishing potential bias. I'll allow it, Judge Morrison said. But get to the point, Counselor. Mrs. Westfield, did you ever refer to Patricia and Robert's home as quaint in a derogatory manner? Vanessa's face flushed. I was being polite. Did you refuse to eat the meal Patricia spent all day preparing for you? I wasn't hungry. Did you spend that entire dinner talking about your family's vacation homes and your parents' social connections? I was making conversation. You were making it clear that you considered the Westfields beneath you. That Patricia, with her working-class background, wasn't good enough to be part of your family. That's not. And when Gregory started distancing himself from his parents, when he stopped visiting, stopped calling, did you encourage him to maintain that distance? I supported my husband's decisions. Including the decision to sue his grieving mother 3 days after his father's funeral. Vanessa's eyes flashed with anger. Patricia doesn't deserve that money. She didn't earn it. Robert built that wealth, not her. And there it was. The truth she'd been trying to hide. Robert built his wealth during his 42-year marriage to Patricia, Daniel said. During which time Patricia worked alongside him, supported him, loved him. But you don't think that partnership counts. You think only financial contribution matters. I think children have rights to their parents' estates. Even when those children abandon their parents for years. Even when they only return after the parent dies, demanding money. Gregory is Robert's son. That's what matters. And Patricia was Robert's wife. For 42 years. Don't you think that matters at all? Vanessa just stared at him, her beautiful face twisted with contempt. And in that moment, everyone in the courtroom saw what I'd seen for 8 years. This woman despised me, not because of anything I'd done, but because of what I represented. Working-class roots. Humble beginnings. Everything she'd trained Gregory to be ashamed of. Daniel dismissed her, and she returned to her seat beside Gregory, trembling with rage. Judge Morrison called for a lunch recess. We'll reconvene at 2 o'clock. At that time, I'll hear from Patricia Westfield herself. My turn to testify. My turn to tell my story. As we filed out of the courtroom, I caught Judge Morrison's eye for just a second. He gave me the slightest nod. Not a sign of bias. Just acknowledgement. You're doing fine. Keep going. And I thought about that girl crying outside Henderson High School all those years ago. The girl who felt like she'd never be enough, never escape the poverty she'd been born into, never amount to anything. Teddy Morrison had told her she'd do great things. I didn't know if building a good life, loving a good man, and standing up for myself in court counted as great things. But that girl would have been proud of me today. And maybe that was enough. I didn't eat lunch. Couldn't. My stomach was twisted in knots, and the thought of food made me nauseous. Daniel and I sat in the small conference room again, going over what I'd say when I testified. He'd prepared me for this, just like he'd prepared me for the deposition. But this was different. This wasn't a room with just lawyers. This was a courtroom. This was my son watching me. This was a judge who'd known me 50 years ago, before Robert, before Gregory, before any of this life I'd built. This was me having to explain why I deserved to exist. Why I mattered. Why 42 years of my life counted for something. Remember, Daniel said, just tell the truth. Tell your story. You're not performing, you're not trying to convince anyone of anything except what actually happened. You lived your life honestly. Let that speak for itself. What if I cry? Then you cry. You just lost your husband and your son is suing you. You're allowed to have emotions. The judge will understand that. At 2 o'clock, we returned to the courtroom. Gregory and Vanessa were already there, watching me with suspicious eyes. Like they thought I'd somehow manipulated the lunch break, conspired with the judge, fixed the entire system against them. Judge Morrison entered. We rose, sat, and he looked directly at me. Mrs. Westfield, please take the stand. My legs felt weak as I walked to the witness box. The bailiff held out a Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. I sat in the chair, acutely aware of every eye in the room on me. The court reporter's fingers poised over her machine. The observers in the back rows leaning forward. Gregory and Vanessa staring at me with barely concealed hatred. And Judge Morrison, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Professional. Neutral. But underneath that, something else. Recognition. Memory. A connection to a past we'd both left behind. Daniel approached the stand with a gentle smile. Mrs. Westfield, thank you for being here today. I know this is difficult. Let's start at the beginning. Can you tell the court about your childhood? I took a breath. Here we go. I grew up in Desert Valley Trailer Park in Henderson, Nevada, I said. My mother, Ruth Holloway, raised me alone. My father left before I was born. We were very poor. My mother worked 3 jobs, cleaning houses, waitressing, and weekend shifts at a convenience store called Quick Stop. I barely saw her. When I did, she was exhausted. What was it like growing up in that environment? Hard. The word came out thick with old pain. We never had enough. Enough food, enough heat, enough money for school supplies or clothes. I wore the same outfits over and over. Kids at school made fun of me, called me trailer trash. I learned to make myself small, invisible. It was safer that way. But you graduated high school? Yes. With straight A's. I got a partial scholarship to community college. But after graduation, my mother told me she couldn't help with living expenses. She didn't have anything extra. So I got on a bus to Los Angeles instead. I thought maybe I could work, save money, try college later. And that's where you met Robert? A smile tugged at my lips despite everything. Yes. At a bus stop. It was pouring rain, and we were both getting soaked. Both of us were late for work. We started talking, and we were both laughing about how broke we were, how we couldn't even afford an umbrella. He asked if I wanted to get coffee sometime. I said yes. What was Robert like when you met him? He was 22, like me, working construction during the day, teaching himself about real estate at night. He'd grown up in rural Idaho, even poorer than I'd been. 6 kids in a 3-bedroom house. He understood hunger. He understood working for everything. He wasn't ashamed of where he came from. He was determined to build something better. When did you get married? 3 months later. We went to City Hall. Couldn't afford a real wedding. Our witnesses were 2 people we pulled off the street. We had $15 between us. After we signed the papers, we walked on Venice Beach and split a sandwich. My voice cracked. It was the happiest day of my life. Tell the court about your marriage. What was it like? And so I did. I told them about the early years, living in a tiny apartment with cockroaches and a broken heater, both of us working multiple jobs, saving every penny. I told them about Robert coming home excited when he closed his first real estate deal, how we'd celebrated with a bottle of cheap wine and takeout Chinese food. I told them about getting pregnant with Gregory, how terrified and excited we'd been. About the small apartment we'd saved up for, the used crib we'd bought, the second-hand baby clothes I'd washed and folded with so much love. Gregory was a beautiful baby, I said, looking at my son across the courtroom. His face was stone. I loved him from the moment I knew he existed. Robert and I both did. We wanted to give him everything we'd never had. Security, stability, love. Did you work during Gregory's childhood? Yes. I worked as a waitress during his school hours, then at a dry cleaner on weekends. Robert was building his business. We both worked constantly, but we made time for Gregory. Family dinners, helping with homework, birthday parties. We weren't wealthy yet, but we were happy. When did Robert's business become successful? Gradually. When Gregory was about 10, Robert bought his first investment property, then another. By the time Gregory was in high school, we were comfortable. Not rich, but comfortable. We bought a house, our first house, after years of renting. I cried when we moved in. It had a real backyard and everything. How did Gregory react to your increasing financial stability? I paused, choosing my words carefully. At first, he was happy, proud of his father. But as he got older, especially in high school and college, he started to change. He became embarrassed by where we'd come from. He'd correct my grammar. He didn't want us to meet his friends. He'd make comments about how we dressed, how we talked. Did you understand why? I thought maybe it was normal teenage stuff. Wanting to fit in. Being embarrassed by your parents. But it got worse when he went to college. He came back speaking differently. Looking at our home like it wasn't good enough. Looking at me like I wasn't good enough. When did he meet Vanessa? When he was about 30. They dated for a year, then got married. I tried so hard with her. My voice broke. I wanted her to like me. I invited them over. I cooked Gregory's favorite meals. I asked about her life, her work. I complimented her. But she looked right through me from the first day. Like I was invisible. Like I didn't matter. Can you describe that first dinner you hosted for them? I spent all day cooking pot roast. Gregory used to beg for it when he was little. I set the table with our nice dishes. I bought flowers. I wanted everything to be perfect. The memory hurt. Vanessa walked in and looked around like she was touring a museum of poverty. She called our home quaint. She barely touched the food. She spent dinner talking about her family's vacation homes, her parents' connections, making it very clear that we weren't her kind of people. How did that make you feel? Small, I whispered. The way I'd felt as a kid in Henderson. Like no matter how hard I'd worked, how far I'd come, I'd never be good enough. Because I'd started in a trailer park, I'd always be trailer trash. Jennifer was on her feet. Objection. The witness is speculating about Mrs. Vanessa Westfield's thoughts and motivations. Sustained. Mrs. Westfield, please stick to your own observations and feelings. I'm sorry, Your Honor, I said. I just meant that's how she made me feel. Whether she intended to or not. Daniel continued. After that first dinner, how often did Gregory and Vanessa visit? Less and less. Maybe once every few months at first. Then a few times a year. Then barely at all. The last time I saw Gregory before Robert died was at Robert's 70th birthday party, 2 years ago. 2 years. Did you try to maintain contact? Constantly. I called. I invited them for holidays. I sent cards and gifts for birthdays and anniversaries. Robert called too. But Gregory was always too busy. They always had other plans. I looked at my son. I kept hoping he'd come back to me, that the little boy who used to hug me and call me Mema was still in there somewhere. Did Robert talk to you about Gregory's distance? All the time. It broke his heart. He kept trying to understand what he'd done wrong. What we'd done wrong. He'd worked so hard to give Gregory opportunities we'd never had, and somehow that made Gregory ashamed of us. Did Robert ever express concerns about Gregory's character? I hesitated. This was the dangerous question. But I'd sworn to tell the truth. Yes, I said quietly. About 3 months before he died, Gregory asked Robert for money, $500,000 to invest in cryptocurrency. Robert refused. Gregory got angry. He said Robert had better remember who his real family was. That when Robert was gone, Gregory would make sure he got what he deserved. The courtroom erupted. Jennifer was objecting. Vanessa was whispering frantically to Gregory. Gregory's face had gone pale. Judge Morrison banged his gavel. Order. Miss Kowalski, your objection. Hearsay, Your Honor. The witness is testifying about conversations she allegedly overheard between Robert Westfield and the petitioner. Your Honor, Daniel said calmly, Mrs. Westfield is testifying about what her husband told her regarding a conversation with their son. This goes directly to Robert Westfield's state of mind when he executed his will, which is at issue in this case. Judge Morrison considered. I'll allow it, but I'll note for the record that this is Mrs. Westfield's testimony about what Robert Westfield told her, not direct evidence of the conversation itself. Continue. Mrs. Westfield, Daniel said, what did Robert do after that conversation with Gregory? He called his attorney. You, Mr. Freeman. He changed his will to make absolutely certain I would be protected. He told me he loved Gregory, but he didn't trust what Gregory had become. He said Vanessa had poisoned our son against us, made him believe that money and status were more important than family. I pulled out the letter Robert had left me, the one Daniel had admitted into evidence. Robert left me this letter. He wrote it 2 days before he died. May I read from it? Judge Morrison nodded. My hands shook as I read. You earned every penny of it by standing beside me for 42 years, through poverty and success, through my mistakes and my victories. You never asked for anything. You never complained. You loved me when I was nobody, and you loved me just the same when I was somebody. My voice broke. I had to stop, take a breath, compose myself. Don't let them take what's yours, I continued. Don't let them make you feel small. You were never small to me. Tears were streaming down my face now, but I didn't care. Let them see. Let them all see what Robert's love had meant to me. Mrs. Westfield, Daniel said gently, why do you think Robert left you his entire estate? Because I earned it, I said, and there was steel in my voice now despite the tears. Not because I manipulated him. Not because I isolated him from Gregory. Gregory did that himself. But because I stood beside Robert for 42 years. I loved him when he had nothing. I worked alongside him. I supported his dreams. I was faithful to him. I made our house a home. I raised our son. And when Robert became successful, I didn't change. I didn't suddenly want expensive things or a different lifestyle. I just wanted him. And he knew that. No further questions, Daniel said, and returned to his seat. Jennifer Kowalski approached for cross-examination. She looked confident, but I could see the calculation in her eyes. She knew she had to be careful. I'd just read a letter from my dead husband declaring his love for me. Attacking me too aggressively would make her look cruel. Mrs. Westfield, she began, you've painted yourself as a devoted wife. But isn't it true that you benefited enormously from Robert's success? I lived in the house he bought, yes. I enjoyed the security his success provided. But I never asked for it. I would have stayed with him if he'd never made a dime. Easy to say now. It's the truth. I married him when he had $15 to his name. I loved him then. I loved him the same 42 years later. You claim you tried to maintain a relationship with Gregory. But isn't it true that you resented his success? That you were jealous of his education and career? No. I was proud of Gregory. I wanted him to have everything we'd never had. That's why Robert and I worked so hard. But you admit you felt small around his wife. That suggests insecurity on your part. It suggests that Vanessa went out of her way to make me feel inferior. There's a difference. Or perhaps you projected your own insecurities onto an innocent woman who simply came from a different background. I looked at Vanessa, sitting at the table with her designer suit and her perfect hair and her contemptuous expression. Vanessa called our home quaint, I said evenly. She refused to eat the meal I cooked. She spent 8 years making it clear that I wasn't welcome in my own son's life. Those aren't my insecurities, Ms. Kowalski. Those are her actions. Jennifer tried several more angles, but I'd lived my truth. There was nothing she could twist, no trap she could set that would change the fundamental facts. I'd loved Robert. He'd loved me. We'd built a life together. And he'd chosen to leave that life's work to me. After an hour, she gave up. No further questions. I left the stand on shaky legs. As I walked back to my seat, I looked at Gregory one more time. For just a second, our eyes met, and in that second, I saw something flicker across his face. Doubt, maybe, or regret, or the ghost of the boy he'd been before Vanessa, before money, before whatever had turned him into this. Then Vanessa grabbed his hand, and the moment was gone. Judge Morrison called for a short recess. When we return, I'll hear closing arguments. In the conference room, Daniel hugged me. You were perfect. Honest, emotional, real. The judge saw exactly who you are. Will it be enough? It'll be enough. But I wasn't so sure. Because this wasn't just about the law. This was about whether the world believed that a woman like me, from a trailer park, with no college degree, who'd spent her life in service jobs, deserved to be honored by a millionaire's final wishes. Whether someone like me counted. Whether I mattered. And I wouldn't know the answer until Judge Morrison made his ruling. The closing arguments were brief. Both lawyers had said everything that needed to be said. Now it was just about crystallizing the story, giving Judge Morrison a framework for his decision. Jennifer Kowalski went first, arguing that biological relationships created obligations that couldn't be erased by marital choices. That Gregory, as Robert's only child, had a moral and legal right to his father's estate. That I'd taken advantage of an elderly man's vulnerability to enrich myself. It stung, hearing her describe my 42-year marriage as opportunistic manipulation. But I kept my face neutral, my hands folded in my lap, my spine straight. Daniel's closing was simple and powerful. He reminded the judge that Robert had been evaluated by medical professionals and found completely competent. That the will was clear, legal, and reflected Robert's explicit wishes. That I'd earned every penny through decades of partnership and love. That Gregory had abandoned his parents long before Robert died, and was now trying to profit from a relationship he'd neglected. Your Honor, Daniel concluded, this case asks a fundamental question. Do 42 years of marriage, partnership, and love count for something? Or does biology alone determine worth? Patricia Westfield loved Robert when he had nothing. She stood by him through poverty and success. She never asked for wealth. She just loved her husband. And Robert, knowing his time was limited, chose to honor that love by ensuring she'd be cared for after he was gone. That's not manipulation. That's marriage. That's what partnership means. And this court should honor Robert Westfield's final wishes by protecting the woman he loved from a son who only remembered his father existed after the money was counted. Judge Morrison was quiet for a long moment after both sides finished. He looked down at his notes, then up at all of us. I'm going to take a short recess to review the evidence and prepare my findings, he said. I expect to have a ruling within an hour. Court is adjourned. An hour. 60 minutes to decide my future. Daniel and I went back to the conference room. I couldn't sit still. I paced, my mind racing through everything that had happened. The testimony. The evidence. The look on Gregory's face when I'd read Robert's letter. What do you think? I asked Daniel. I think we presented a strong case. I think the law is on our side. I think. His phone rang. He looked at the screen, frowned. It's Helen Morrison, the senior partner from their firm. Answer it, I said. He put it on speaker. Helen. Daniel. Her voice was tense. I'm calling because I wanted to give you a heads up. Gregory and Vanessa are in our offices right now, screaming at Jennifer. They're demanding that she do something, file an emergency motion, claim judicial bias, anything to delay or overturn whatever ruling is coming. On what grounds? They're convinced the judge is biased because of his high school connection with Patricia. They think the fix is in. Vanessa is threatening to file complaints with the state bar, to go to the media, to make this as ugly as possible. My stomach dropped. Can they do that? Can they claim bias? They can claim anything, Helen said. Whether it'll work is another story. Judge Morrison disclosed the connection. He's been scrupulously fair. But they're panicking. They came into this thinking it would be an easy win. Helpless widow, no connections, no power. Instead, they're losing. And they can't handle it. So what happens now? Daniel asked. Now I'm officially advising them to accept whatever ruling comes down and move on. Jennifer is too junior to stand up to them effectively, but I'm not. I'm telling them that if they try to drag this out with baseless appeals and media campaigns, they'll lose worse. They'll spend hundreds of thousands in legal fees and end up with nothing. She paused. But I'm not sure they're listening. Vanessa especially. She's furious. She's talking about how Patricia must have planned this, must have known Judge Morrison would be assigned to the case. That's ridiculous, I said. I didn't even know Teddy, Judge Morrison, was in Los Angeles. I know that. You know that. But Vanessa has convinced herself there's a conspiracy. And Gregory is going along with whatever she says. Thank you for the warning, Daniel said. Good luck, Helen said, and hung up. I sat down heavily. They're never going to stop, are they? Even if we win today, they'll appeal, they'll file complaints, they'll try to destroy me any way they can. Let them try, Daniel said firmly. We'll fight every baseless motion. We'll document every frivolous claim. And if they want to go to the media, fine. The story of a grieving widow being harassed by her greedy son won't play well in the press. They're digging their own grave. But I felt sick. This wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about Gregory's complete willingness to destroy me, to erase me, to spend years and hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to prove I didn't matter. If you're still with me, if you've been listening to this whole story, please do me a favor. Leave a comment telling me if you've ever had family turn on you like this. Tell me I'm not alone in feeling like the people who should love you most can sometimes hurt you worst. And check that description box below for more stories about survival, about fighting back, about refusing to disappear. Because that's what this had become. A fight for my right to exist. To be seen. To matter. The bailiff came to get us exactly 53 minutes after the recess had started. Judge Morrison is ready with his ruling. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Daniel took my arm, steadying me as we walked back to the courtroom. Gregory and Vanessa were already seated, both of them rigid with tension. Jennifer Kowalski looked exhausted. The observers in the back had multiplied. Word must have spread that a ruling was coming. All rise. Judge Morrison entered and took his seat. His expression was serious, unreadable. Please be seated. The courtroom felt like it was holding its breath. Judge Morrison looked down at his notes, then up at all of us. His gaze swept across both tables, landing briefly on me. In that moment, I couldn't read what he was thinking. Professional distance had completely taken over. I've reviewed all the evidence presented today, he began, his voice formal and measured. The testimony of the parties, the documentary evidence, the medical records, the will itself, and the applicable law. This court's role is not to determine what's fair or moral, but to interpret the law and apply it to the facts presented. He paused, and I felt like I might stop breathing. The petitioner, Gregory Westfield, contests his father's will on 3 grounds. That Robert Westfield was not of sound mind when he executed the will, that Robert Westfield was subject to undue influence by the respondent, and that the will does not reflect Robert Westfield's true intentions regarding his estate. Judge Morrison looked at Gregory. Let me address each of these claims in turn. First, the question of mental competence. The evidence before this court includes a comprehensive cognitive evaluation performed by Dr. Raymond Chen 2 months before Robert Westfield's death. Dr. Chen found Robert Westfield to be in excellent mental health, with no signs of dementia, confusion, or impaired judgment. The petitioner has presented no medical evidence to contradict this. No testimony from doctors who treated Robert Westfield. No documented instances of confusion or irrationality. The claim that Robert Westfield was not of sound mind is not supported by any credible evidence. 1 down. I felt Daniel's hand squeeze mine under the table. Second, The question of undue influence. For a will to be set aside on grounds of undue influence, the petitioner must show that the beneficiary exerted such pressure or manipulation that the testator's free will was overcome. The evidence shows that Patricia Westfield was present in Robert Westfield's life, as would be expected of a spouse of 42 years. She was not present when he executed his will. The attorney who drafted it, Mr. Daniel Freeman, testified that Patricia Westfield did not know the contents of the will until after Robert Westfield's death. There is no evidence that she isolated Robert Westfield from his son. In fact, the phone records show Robert Westfield repeatedly attempted to contact Gregory, while Gregory rarely returned those calls or visits. Judge Morrison's voice hardened slightly. The petitioner testified that he felt guilty about not visiting his father, and that he interpreted Patricia Westfield's honest statements about Robert Westfield's loneliness as guilt-tripping. A spouse informing a child that their parent misses them is not undue influence. It's honest communication. The fact that it made Gregory Westfield uncomfortable does not make it manipulation. 2 down. Hope was building in my chest, but I didn't dare believe it yet. Third, the question of Robert Westfield's true intentions. The petitioner argues that Robert Westfield must have intended for his biological son to inherit, regardless of what the will actually says. But this court cannot substitute its judgment, or the petitioner's wishes, for the explicit, legally executed intentions of the testator. Robert Westfield left a clear will. He also left a letter to his wife explaining his reasoning, which has been admitted into evidence. That letter makes his intentions unmistakably clear. Judge Morrison picked up a copy of Robert's letter and read aloud, "You earned every penny of it by standing beside me for 42 years. I'm leaving everything to you because you deserve it. But also because I don't trust what Gregory would do with it. Not anymore. Not with Vanessa whispering in his ear." The words hung in the air. Gregory flinched like he'd been slapped. Robert Westfield knew exactly what he was doing, Judge Morrison continued. He was protecting his wife. He was honoring their 42-year partnership. And he was making a deliberate choice about his son, based on his son's behavior and values. This court may or may not agree with that choice, but it is not this court's place to overturn the explicit wishes of a competent testator simply because his biological son disagrees with them. Judge Morrison set down the letter and looked directly at Gregory. His expression was stern now, almost disappointed. "Mr. Westfield, your father built his wealth during a 42-year marriage to Patricia Westfield. She worked alongside him. She supported him. She loved him when he had nothing and loved him the same when he had everything. You, by your own testimony, visited your father exactly once in the last 2 years of his life. You called him 7 times in 2 years. When he died, you shook your stepmother's hand at the funeral and left. 3 days later, you hired lawyers to sue her." Gregory's face was bright red. Vanessa's hand was clenched on his arm. This court finds no legal basis for setting aside Robert Westfield's will. The will is valid. Patricia Westfield is the rightful beneficiary of Robert Westfield's estate. The petitioner's claims are denied in their entirety. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. Furthermore, Judge Morrison continued, and his voice took on an edge I'd never heard before. This court finds that this lawsuit was without substantial merit and appears to have been filed primarily to harass the respondent during her time of grief. Therefore, the court orders that the petitioner shall pay the respondent's reasonable attorney fees and costs. Another crack of the gavel. This matter is concluded. Court is adjourned. For a moment, I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't process what had just happened. I'd won. After everything, the betrayal, the accusations, the months of legal torture, I'd won. Daniel was hugging me, laughing with relief. "We did it, Patricia. We won." But I wasn't looking at Daniel. I was looking across the courtroom at Gregory. My son was staring at the table in front of him, his face ashen. Vanessa was hissing something in his ear, her face contorted with fury. Jennifer Kowalski was gathering her papers with shaking hands, probably already dreading the conversation she'd have to have with her clients about the attorney fees they'd now have to pay. Judge Morrison stood to leave, but before he exited through the door behind the bench, he paused. He looked at me one more time, and the professional mask slipped just enough for me to see the man underneath. Teddy Morrison from Henderson High. The boy who'd told a crying girl that she'd do great things. He gave me the smallest nod. Pride. Maybe. Or just acknowledgement. You survived. You stood up for yourself. You won. Then he was gone. The courtroom erupted into motion. Observers were whispering, filing out. The court reporter was packing up her equipment. Daniel was talking about next steps, about making sure the judgment was properly entered, about collecting the attorney fees. And I was still staring at Gregory. He finally looked up and met my eyes. For the first time in years, maybe the first time ever, I saw my son clearly. Not the little boy I'd loved. Not the man I'd hoped he'd become. But the person he actually was. Weak. Controlled by his wife. Driven by greed and status and a deep, poisonous shame about where he'd come from. He'd sued his own mother rather than deal with his guilt about abandoning his father. He'd tried to take everything rather than face the fact that he'd been a bad son, a selfish son, a son who'd valued money over love. And he'd lost. Vanessa pulled him to his feet and practically dragged him toward the exit. As they passed our table, she stopped and leaned close to me. "This isn't over," she hissed. "We'll appeal. We'll file complaints. We'll make sure everyone knows you manipulated that judge." I looked at her calmly. "Go ahead. I've got nothing to hide. Can you say the same?" Her eyes blazed with hatred, but Gregory pulled her away before she could respond. They disappeared through the courtroom doors, Jennifer Kowalski trailing behind them looking miserable. Daniel and I sat there for a while longer, just breathing, letting it sink in. "You did it," he said finally. "You stood up to them. You told your truth. And you won." "I won the case," I said quietly, "but I lost my son." "You lost him a long time ago, Patricia. This just made it official." He was right. Gregory had been gone for years. I'd just been too heartbroken to admit it. We gathered our things and left the courtroom. As we walked through the courthouse hallways, I felt strange. Lighter. Somehow. Like I'd been carrying a weight I hadn't even realized was there, and now it was gone. The weight of hoping Gregory would love me again. The weight of trying to be good enough, trying to deserve his affection, trying to understand what I'd done wrong. I was done carrying that weight. Outside the courthouse, the California sun was still shining. Traffic hummed past. People hurried by with their briefcases and their worries. The world kept turning, indifferent to my small victory. But it was my victory. Mine. I'd walked into that courtroom as Patricia Westfield, the 67-year-old widow everyone thought they could dismiss. The woman from a trailer park who'd married above her station. The mother whose own son found her embarrassing. And I'd walked out as Patricia Westfield, the woman who'd built a life from nothing. Who'd loved faithfully for 42 years. Who'd stood up when it would have been easier to lie down. Who'd won. Daniel drove me home. We didn't talk much. There wasn't much to say. It was over, and we both knew it would take time to process everything that had happened. When we pulled up to my house, Robert's house, my house, the house we'd bought together and filled with love, Daniel turned to me. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now?" I looked at the house, thinking about the silence waiting inside. The empty rooms. The life I'd have to figure out how to live without Robert. Now I figure out who Patricia Westfield is. Not Robert's wife. Not Gregory's mother. Just me. "He'd be proud of you," Daniel said. "Robert. He'd be so proud." I nodded, not trusting my voice. After Daniel left, I sat in my car for a while, looking at my home. Robert's ghost was in there, in every room, every piece of furniture, every photograph on every wall. But so was my life. My work. My love. My 42 years of partnership and sacrifice and joy. This was my house now. My future. My choice what to do with it all. I got out of the car and walked to the front door. As I put my key in the lock, I thought about that sealed envelope still sitting in Robert's desk. The nuclear option. The information that would have ended the lawsuit immediately but destroyed any chance of reconciliation with Gregory forever. I'd never opened it. Never needed to. We'd won without it. But I was curious now. What had Robert known? What secret had he kept that was powerful enough to end everything? I made myself a cup of tea, sat down at Robert's desk, and opened the envelope. Inside were several documents. Legal papers. Birth certificates. Adoption records. And a letter from Robert, written specifically to be read only if I opened this envelope. Asterisk, my dearest Patricia, asterisk. Asterisk, if you're reading this, then Gregory went through with the lawsuit, and you had to fight him. I'm sorry for that. I hoped he'd remember who he was, remember the values we taught him. But I prepared for the worst. Asterisk. Asterisk. What I'm about to tell you is something I've kept secret for 38 years. Something I never told anyone, including you. I'm sorry for that too. But I thought I was protecting Gregory. Protecting our family. Asterisk. Asterisk. Gregory is not my biological son. Asterisk. The words swam in front of my eyes. I read them again. Again. Asterisk. When you got pregnant, we were both so happy. But you had complications early in the pregnancy. You don't remember because you were unconscious, but you hemorrhaged. We lost the baby. Our first child. Gone. Asterisk. Asterisk. You were devastated. We both were. But you started to spiral into a depression so deep I was afraid I'd lose you too. The doctors said it might be months before you could try again. Maybe never. Asterisk. Asterisk. And then a miracle happened. Or what I thought was a miracle. Asterisk. Asterisk. A friend of mine, David Chen, called me. His sister had just given birth to a baby boy. She was 18, unmarried, terrified. Her family wanted her to give the baby up for adoption. David knew we'd just lost ours. He asked if we'd consider. Asterisk. Asterisk. I should have talked to you. Should have told you everything. But you were in the hospital, recovering, grieving. And I saw a chance to make things right. To give you a baby to love. To save you from that depression. Asterisk. Asterisk. I arranged everything privately. The adoption. The papers. I told everyone, including you, that our baby had survived, that you'd just been confused from the trauma and medication. I brought Gregory home, and you loved him immediately. You thought he was the baby you'd carried. Your son. Our son. Asterisk. Asterisk. And he was, Patricia. Biology doesn't matter. I loved that boy as much as if he'd been mine by blood. We raised him together. We gave him everything. Asterisk. Asterisk. But he's not my biological heir. He has no legal claim to my estate beyond what I choose to give him. And given what he's become, given how he's treated you, I choose to give him nothing. Asterisk. Asterisk. The adoption was finalized legally, but it was done quietly. Gregory's birth certificate lists us as his parents, but the adoption records exist. They're attached to this letter. Asterisk. Asterisk. If you need to use this information to end his lawsuit, you have my blessing. Tell him the truth. Tell the court. Tell the world. Asterisk. Asterisk. Or don't. It's your choice now. It was always supposed to be our secret, Patricia. But now it's yours alone. Asterisk. Asterisk. I'm sorry I never told you. I'm sorry for a lot of things. Asterisk. Asterisk. But I'm not sorry I brought Gregory home to you that day. For 20 years, he gave us joy. He was our son in every way that mattered. Asterisk. Asterisk. He just forgot that somewhere along the way. Asterisk. Asterisk. I love you, my darling Patricia. I always have. I always will. Asterisk. Asterisk. Robert. Asterisk. I sat there in the gathering darkness, holding the letter, as my entire understanding of my life rearranged itself. Gregory wasn't Robert's biological son. I'd lost my first baby and never even known it. The child I'd loved for 38 years, the child I'd sacrificed everything for, wasn't the baby I'd carried. But he was my son. Adoption or not, blood or not, he was the baby I'd held in the hospital. The toddler I'd taught to walk. The child I'd read to every night. The teenager I'd worried about and been proud of and loved with every fiber of my being. Biology didn't change that. But it changed the lawsuit. It changed everything about Gregory's claims. He had no biological right to Robert's estate. None at all. If I'd revealed this information in court, the case would have been over immediately. Gregory would have had no standing to sue. But it also would have destroyed him. Would have told him that the father he'd neglected, the father he'd threatened and sued, wasn't his father at all. That his entire identity was a lie. Robert had given me the weapon to end the war. And I'd won the war without using it. I thought about that envelope, sealed and waiting. About Robert trusting me to make the right choice about when, or if, to use it. I'd made the right choice. I knew that now. Because Gregory was still my son. Biology be damned. I'd raised him. Loved him. He would always be my son, even if he'd stopped being my child. And some secrets were meant to stay buried. I carefully folded the documents back into the envelope. I sealed it again. And I put it back in Robert's desk, in the drawer where it had been waiting all this time. Gregory would never know. The truth would stay hidden, the way Robert had intended, the way I now chose. Not because Gregory deserved that kindness, but because I did. Because I didn't want to live with the knowledge that I'd destroyed what was left of my son, even to save myself. I'd won without it. That was enough. That night, alone in my house, I finally let myself cry. Not tears of defeat or grief, but tears of release. Of survival. Of coming through the fire and still being myself. I'd lost my husband. I'd lost my son, at least the version of him I'd always loved. But I'd found something else. I'd found Patricia. Not Patricia Holloway from the trailer park. Not Patricia Westfield, Robert's wife. Not Gregory's mother. Just Patricia. A woman who'd survived poverty, loss, betrayal, and a legal battle. A woman who'd stood up for herself when everyone expected her to fold. A woman who was finally done apologizing for existing. The weeks after the trial were strange. Quiet. Like the eye of a hurricane, when you're not sure if the storm is really over or if you're just in the calm between waves of destruction. Daniel called regularly to check on me. The judgment had been officially entered. Gregory and Vanessa had until a certain deadline to file an appeal if they were going to. He didn't think they would, the case had been too one-sided, and appeals were expensive, but he wanted me prepared just in case. "How are you really doing?" he asked me one afternoon, about 2 weeks after the trial. "I don't know," I admitted. "I won. I should be happy. But mostly I just feel empty." "That's normal. You've been living in crisis mode for months. Now that the crisis is over, your body and mind have to adjust. Give yourself time to grieve, Patricia. Not just for Robert, but for Gregory too. For the relationship you'll never have." He was right, but the grief felt complicated. How do you mourn someone who's still alive? Someone who chose to leave you? I spent a lot of time alone in that house, sorting through Robert's things. Deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to pack away. Each item had memories attached. His favorite coffee mug. The reading glasses he'd left on his nightstand. The watch Gregory had given him, that $89.99 watch with the price tag, that I found in the back of a drawer where Robert had put it and never worn it. That watch broke my heart more than anything else. Robert had kept it, but he couldn't bring himself to wear it. A gift from his son that cost less than $100, given without thought or love, just obligation. I should have donated it. Should have thrown it away. Instead, I put it in a box with other things I couldn't quite let go of. Gregory's baby clothes. His school projects. Photographs of happier times. Evidence that once upon a time, we'd been a family. About 3 weeks after the trial, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. I'd gotten a few calls from reporters after the case, wanting to write human interest stories about the widow who'd stood up to her son. I'd declined all of them. This wasn't a story for public consumption. It was my life. But something made me answer this call. "Patricia." The voice was familiar, but I couldn't place it immediately. "Yes. It's Teddy. Teddy Morrison. Judge Morrison." My heart skipped. "Your Honor, is this about the case? Is something wrong?" No. The case is closed. This is personal. Off the record. I'm just calling as someone who knew you a long time ago and wanted to check in. Is that okay?" "Yes," I said, surprised. "Yes, of course. I've been thinking about you since the trial," he said. "About Henderson. About those kids we were. I wanted to tell you something I didn't get to say in court." "What's that?" "I'm proud of you, Patricia. For standing up for yourself. For not letting them break you. You always had a quiet strength, even back in high school. You didn't see it, but I did. And I'm glad you found it again when you needed it." My throat tightened with emotion. "Thank you. That means more than you know." "Can I tell you something else? Something I remembered after you left the courtroom?" "Please." "That day senior year, when I found you crying outside school. You told me your mother couldn't help with college expenses. That your dreams were falling apart. Do you remember what you told me?" I tried to remember. It had been 50 years ago, and so much had happened since then. "I don't think so." "You said, I just wanted to matter. I wanted to build something that proved I wasn't just trailer trash. That I was worth something. And I told you that you'd do great things, remember?" "I remember." "Well, You did. You built a life. You loved someone deeply and were loved in return. You raised a child. You survived poverty and loss and betrayal. And when someone tried to erase you, tried to claim you didn't matter, you stood up and said no. That's great, Patricia. That's everything. I was crying now, silently, tears streaming down my face. I can't be your friend while the case could still be appealed, Teddy continued. It wouldn't be appropriate. But after the appeal deadline passes, if you'd ever like to grab coffee and catch up, just two old classmates from Henderson, I'd really like that. I think we have a lot to talk about. I'd like that too, I managed. After we hung up, I sat in Robert's study and let myself cry. For Robert. For Gregory. For that girl crying outside Henderson High who'd felt like she'd never be enough. For all the versions of Patricia I'd been, and the one I was becoming. The appeal deadline came and went. Gregory didn't appeal. Daniel called to tell me it was officially, completely over. They missed the deadline. The judgment is final. The estate is yours, free and clear. They can't touch it now. It's really over. It's really over. I should have felt triumphant. Victorious. Instead, I mostly felt tired. A few days later, something unexpected happened. I got a letter in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Gregory's handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Asterisk mom, asterisk. Asterisk I don't know why I'm writing this. Vanessa would be furious if she knew. She says we should never speak to you again, that you humiliated us in court, that you somehow manipulated the judge. Asterisk. Asterisk but I can't stop thinking about Dad's letter. The one you read in court. About how you loved him when he was nobody. Asterisk. Asterisk I remember that, you know. Growing up. The way you and Dad looked at each other. The way he'd kiss your forehead in the kitchen when he thought I wasn't watching. The way you'd laugh at his jokes even when they weren't funny. Asterisk. Asterisk I remember the pot roast you used to make. How you'd spend all day cooking it because you knew it was my favorite. I loved that pot roast, Mom. I was just too embarrassed to admit it to Vanessa. Asterisk. Asterisk I remember a lot of things I've been trying to forget. Asterisk. Asterisk I don't know how to fix this. Vanessa says we can't. She says you'll never forgive us, and maybe she's right. Maybe you shouldn't. Asterisk. Asterisk I just wanted you to know that I remember. That somewhere under everything I became, there's still the kid who brought you dandelions. Who thought you could fix anything. Who loved you. Asterisk. Asterisk I'm sorry I forgot how to show it. Asterisk. Asterisk I don't know if that matters anymore. I don't know if it should. Asterisk. Asterisk but I wanted you to know. Asterisk. Asterisk Gregory. Asterisk. I read that letter a dozen times. Looking for something. A real apology. A promise to change. An acknowledgement of how deeply he'd hurt me. It wasn't there. Just a vague expression of regret, wrapped in excuses and blame shifting. Asterisk Vanessa says. Asterisk asterisk I was embarrassed. Asterisk asterisk I don't know how to fix this. Asterisk. Not, I was wrong. I hurt you. I'm sorry. I want to make this right. Just, I remember when things were better, and I wish they still were, but I don't actually want to do the hard work of repairing what I broke. I wrote 3 different responses to that letter. In the first, I poured out all my hurt and anger, told him exactly what his betrayal had cost me. In the second, I offered forgiveness and reconciliation, told him I'd always love him no matter what. In the third, I tried to find middle ground, acknowledging his letter while maintaining boundaries. In the end, I sent none of them. Because Gregory's letter wasn't really about reconciliation. It was about assuaging his guilt. About making himself feel better without actually having to change anything. He wanted to be forgiven without apologizing. Wanted me to fix our relationship while he maintained all the same behaviors, the same priorities, the same wife who despised me. He wanted his mother back, but only the parts of her that didn't make him uncomfortable. The loving parts, the forgiving parts, the parts that would never hold him accountable. And I was done being that version of myself. So I put his letter in the box with the $89.99 watch and the baby clothes and the photographs. Evidence of what we'd been. What we could have had. And I moved forward. I had coffee with Teddy Morrison once the appeal deadline passed. We met at a cafe in Santa Monica, both of us older versions of the kids we'd been in Henderson. We talked about our lives, his career as a lawyer and then a judge, his wife who died of cancer 5 years ago, his grown children who lived on the East Coast. My marriage to Robert, my years working various jobs while he built his business, my survival of poverty and loss. We talked about Henderson. About Desert Valley Trailer Park and the parts of our past we'd both tried to forget and never quite could. Do you ever go back? I asked him. No. You? No. I don't think I ever will. That girl I was there, she doesn't exist anymore. Sure she does, Teddy said. She's the foundation of who you are now. You can't build something strong without a strong foundation, even if it's made of hard times and difficult lessons. We became friends over the following months. Not romantic, neither of us was looking for that, but real friends. Two people who'd come from nothing and survived to tell about it. Two people who understood what it meant to build yourself from scratch. He introduced me to his circle of friends, other professionals and retirees, people who welcomed me without judgment or questions about my background. I started to build a life that was mine, not defined by being Robert's wife or Gregory's mother. I volunteered at a women's shelter, helping women who reminded me of my mother, exhausted, struggling, trying to survive in a world that treated them as invisible. I used some of Robert's money to fund educational grants for women from low-income backgrounds. Scholarships for the girls who were wearing the same 3 outfits to school, who were crying outside their high schools because college seemed impossible. I helped them. Because no one had been there to help Patricia Holloway when she'd needed it. Because I could be the person I'd needed when I was 17 and terrified. Robert would have approved. He'd always believed in lifting people up, in remembering where you came from and helping others escape it. 6 months after the trial, I got another letter from Gregory. This one was shorter. Mom, Vanessa and I are getting divorced. I'm not asking for your help or your forgiveness. I just thought you should know. She was right about one thing. I did become someone I'm not proud of. I don't know how to fix that. But I'm trying to figure it out. G***. I didn't respond to that letter either. But I kept it, separate from the box of memories. Current. Present tense. A sign that maybe, somewhere, my son was starting to wake up. Or maybe not. Maybe it was just another expression of regret without real change. Either way, it wasn't my job to save him anymore. He had to save himself. I'd spent 38 years trying to be the perfect mother, trying to earn Gregory's love, trying to understand what I'd done wrong. Years of making myself smaller so he could feel bigger. Years of accepting crumbs of affection and calling them a feast. I was done with that. If Gregory wanted a relationship with me someday, he'd have to do the work. Real apologies. Real change. Real acknowledgement of the hurt he'd caused. Until then, I had my own life to live. A life I'd earned. A life Robert had made sure I could have. A life where I finally mattered. Not because someone else said I did. But because I said I did. And that was enough. A year after the trial, I sold the house. It wasn't an easy decision. That house held 40 years of memories, Robert and me moving in with our few possessions, feeling like we'd made it. Gregory learning to ride a bike in the driveway. Christmases and birthdays and ordinary evenings that had felt like everything. Robert's laugh echoing through the rooms. The sound of his footsteps on the stairs. But it also held ghosts. Too much silence. Too many empty rooms. Too many memories of a family that no longer existed. So I sold it and bought a smaller condo overlooking the ocean. 2 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows, a balcony where I could drink my morning coffee and watch the sun rise over the Pacific. It was mine. Not Robert's. Not Gregory's. Mine. I furnished it exactly how I wanted it. Bright colors, yellows and blues and greens that made me think of hope and new beginnings. Comfortable furniture that I didn't have to worry about keeping perfect. Artwork from local artists, women whose work spoke to me. Photographs from my new life, not just my old one. It felt like freedom. Teddy came to the housewarming party I threw, along with my new friends from the Women's Shelter Board, the book club I'd joined, the hiking group I'd discovered. My condo was full of laughter and conversation and people who knew me as Patricia. Not someone's wife, not someone's mother, just Patricia, and like me anyway. I was 68 years old, and I was finally learning who I was. About 2 months after I moved, on a Saturday afternoon when I was on my balcony reading, my phone rang. Unknown number. I'd stopped being afraid of unknown numbers. They were usually just telemarketers, occasionally reporters who'd stumbled onto my story somehow. I could handle both. Hello. Mom. Gregory's voice. I hadn't heard it in over a year, not since the trial. It sounded different. Quieter. Uncertain in a way I'd never heard from him before. Gregory, I said, my heart pounding. What do you want? I know I have no right to call you. I know that. But I wanted to tell you something, and I thought I should do it before I lost my nerve. I waited. Didn't make it easy for him. He needed to do this himself. I've been in therapy, he said. Since the divorce. Trying to understand how I became the person I became. The person who sued his own mother. Who abandoned his father. Who let Vanessa tell him what to think and feel and want. And my voice was cautious. I'd heard regret from him before. It had never led anywhere real. And I'm starting to understand some things. About shame. About how I spent my whole adult life trying to run away from where I came from. From the trailer park Grandma Ruth lived in. From Dad working construction. From you working as a waitress. I was so ashamed, Mom. So ashamed that I came from poverty. And Vanessa fed that shame, made me think that who I was before I met her was something to hide. He took a shaky breath. I told my therapist about the lawsuit. About Dad's letter that you read in court. About how you loved him when he was nobody. And she asked me, when did you stop loving your parents for who they were and start resenting them for who they weren't? And I didn't have an answer. Because I couldn't remember when it happened. It was just gradual. Piece by piece. Until one day I was someone I don't recognize. Someone who sued his grieving mother for money. I was quiet, listening. Part of me wanted to jump in, to forgive him, to tell him it was okay. But it wasn't okay. And I needed to hear what he was really saying. I can't fix what I did, Gregory continued. I know that. I can't give you back that year of hell I put you through. I can't undo testifying against you in court. I can't take back the things Vanessa said about you, the things I let her say. I can't bring Dad back and tell him I'm sorry for wasting the last years of his life avoiding him. His voice cracked. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. Who I became. And I'm ashamed of that person, Mom. Really, truly ashamed. Not ashamed of where I came from anymore. Ashamed of who I turned into when I rejected where I came from. There was a long silence. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, waiting for me to say something. Why are you telling me this? I asked finally. Because I don't want to die someday with you thinking I never understood. Thinking I never saw you. Thinking I never realized what you and Dad gave me. He paused. And because I wanted to say I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not I'm sorry but or I'm sorry however. Just. I'm sorry. For all of it. You deserved better from me. You deserved so much better. My eyes were stinging with tears, but I kept my voice steady. What do you want from me, Gregory? Nothing, he said, and he sounded like he meant it. I'm not calling to ask for forgiveness. I'm not calling to rebuild our relationship. I'm not calling to make myself feel better by having you tell me it's okay. I just wanted you to know that I see what I did. And that I'm sorry. That's all. Okay, I said. Thank you for telling me. Another silence. How are you? Gregory asked, his voice almost shy. I heard you moved. That you're doing work with women's shelters and educational grants. Who told you that? I've been following you. Not in a creepy way, he added quickly. Just public records. Articles about the grants you've been funding. I wanted to know if you were okay. If you survived what I did to you. I survived, I said. I'm doing more than surviving, actually. I'm living. Really living, maybe for the first time in my life. I'm glad, he said, and it sounded genuine. You deserve that. You always did. We talked for a few more minutes. Awkward, halting conversation. He told me about his divorce, about the therapy, about moving to a smaller apartment and selling the big house he and Vanessa had bought. About starting over at 40. I told him about my condo, about my volunteer work, about the friends I'd made. I didn't tell him about the sealed envelope in Robert's desk, about the secret I'd kept. Some things were better left buried. When we finally said goodbye, he said, "I don't expect you to call me back. I don't expect anything. But if you ever want to talk, or maybe even see me, my number's the same. No pressure. Just, if you ever want to." After we hung up, I sat on my balcony for a long time, watching the ocean. Waves crashing on the shore, retreating, crashing again. Constant motion. Constant change. Part of me wanted to call him back immediately. Wanted to forgive everything, rebuild our relationship, get my son back. The mother in me, the part that had loved him from the moment he was born, adopted or not, blood or not, wanted her baby back. But another part of me, the part I'd built over the past year, was more cautious. Words were easy. Apologies were easy. Real change was hard. And I'd spent too many years accepting Gregory's scraps of affection, his half-hearted attempts at connection, his willingness to love me only when it was convenient for him. I didn't want scraps anymore. If Gregory really had changed, if he really understood what he'd done, then he'd prove it through actions over time. Not one phone call. Not one apology. But sustained effort. Consistent change. Real commitment to being different. And if he hadn't really changed, if this was just another wave of guilt that would pass, then I'd be okay. I'd survive. I'd already proven I could. I called Teddy that evening and told him about Gregory's call. "How do you feel about it?" he asked. Confused. Hopeful. Cautious. Sad. Everything at once. That makes sense. He's still your son. You're allowed to want a relationship with him. But you're also allowed to protect yourself. To require that he earn back your trust before you open your heart to him again. How long do I wait? How do I know if he's really changed? You wait as long as you need to. And you watch his actions, not just his words. If he's serious, he'll keep showing up. He'll keep working on himself. He'll prove it through consistency over time. Teddy was right. So I waited. Gregory called again 2 weeks later. Just to check in, he said. To see how I was doing. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing important. The weather, a movie I'd seen, a restaurant he'd tried. Normal conversation. The kind of conversation a mother and son might have if there wasn't a lawsuit and years of pain between them. He called again 2 weeks after that. And then again. Not pushing, not demanding, just there. Present. Consistent. 3 months after his first call, he asked if he could see me. Just coffee, he said. Just an hour. If I wasn't ready, he'd understand, but he'd really like to see me. I almost said no. Almost told him I needed more time. But something in me was curious. Wanted to see if the person on the phone matched the person in front of me. Wanted to look in my son's eyes and see if the change was real. So I said yes. We met at a cafe in Santa Monica, not far from where I'd had coffee with Teddy that first time. Neutral ground. Public. Safe. Gregory arrived 5 minutes early. I watched him through the window before I went in. He looked different. Older. Thinner. He'd let his hair grow out a little, less of the corporate precision he'd always maintained. He wore jeans and a simple shirt, not the expensive suits I was used to seeing him in. He looked like someone who'd stopped trying so hard to be someone else. When I walked in, he stood immediately. For a moment, we just looked at each other. My son. My baby. The man who'd tried to destroy me. The boy who'd brought me dandelions. All of those people in one complicated, broken, maybe healing human. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly. "Hi, Gregory." We Saturday. Ordered coffee. And slowly, carefully, we started to talk. He told me more about his therapy, about the work he was doing to understand his relationship with shame and class and identity. About how Vanessa had found every insecurity he had and weaponized it. About how he'd let her because it was easier than facing who he really was. "I don't blame her for everything," he said. "I made my own choices. I pushed you and Dad away. I sued you. That was me. But she made it easier to be that person. She gave me permission to be ashamed of you instead of proud of you." "Why?" I asked. "Why were you ashamed? What did I do that was so terrible?" He shook his head. "Nothing. That's what I'm trying to understand. You were a good mother. You loved me. You worked hard. You gave me everything you could. But somewhere in my head, I decided that everything you could wasn't enough. That I deserved a mother with a college degree and a professional career and connections. That having a mom who'd worked as a waitress was something to hide. "I'm not ashamed of that work," I said. "I did what I had to do. I helped your father build his business while I contributed financially however I could. That's partnership. That's marriage. I know that now. I'm starting to know that. But at the time, all I could see was what I thought you weren't. Not what you actually were." We talked for 2 hours. Not fixing everything. You can't fix years of hurt in one conversation. But starting. Opening the door just a crack to the possibility that maybe, someday, we could have some kind of relationship. Not like before. Never like before. But something new. Something built on honesty instead of obligation. When we said goodbye, Gregory hugged me. The first time he'd hugged me in years. And I let him. Let myself feel the complicated tangle of love and hurt and hope and caution all at once. "Thank you for seeing me," he said. "For giving me a chance to try to do better." "I'm not promising anything," I said. "I'm just open to seeing what happens." That's more than I deserve. Maybe. But it's what I'm willing to give. Over the following months, Gregory kept showing up. Not perfectly. He missed a planned call once when he was overwhelmed with work. He sometimes still said things that revealed old patterns of thinking, old assumptions about class and worth. But he caught himself. Apologized. Tried to do better. He went to therapy consistently. He started volunteering at a literacy program for adults, teaching people who'd never had the opportunities he'd taken for granted. He told me about the students who reminded him of me, of his grandma Ruth, of all the people who'd worked so hard and never gotten the recognition they deserved. He was trying. Really trying. And slowly, so slowly, I started to trust it. We're not healed. I don't know if we ever will be completely. The lawsuit left scars that won't just disappear. There are things he said in that courtroom, things he did during my darkest time of grief, that I'll never fully forget. But forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing not to let the past poison the future. It's about recognizing that people can change, even when the change comes late. Even when it comes after damage has been done. Gregory will never be the son I thought I had. The little boy who brought me dandelions lives only in my memories. But maybe he can be something else. Something real. A grown man who made terrible mistakes and is genuinely trying to be better. I can work with that. Now, 2 years after the trial, I'm sitting on my balcony watching another sunset. The ocean stretches out before me, endless and changing and constant all at once. I'm 70 years old. I'm a widow. I'm a mother whose relationship with her son is complicated and fragile and still being rebuilt piece by piece. But I'm also Patricia. Just Patricia. The girl from the trailer park who built a life. Who loved deeply and was loved in return. Who survived betrayal and stood up for herself when everyone expected her to lie down. Who learned, finally, that her worth wasn't determined by her son's approval or her husband's wealth or her mother's sacrifices. Her worth was inherent. Always had been. She just needed 6 to 7 years and a lawsuit to finally believe it. The women at the shelter tell me I inspire them. The girls who receive the educational grants I fund write me letters about their dreams, their plans, their gratitude. Teddy tells me I'm one of the strongest people he knows. My friends marvel at how I've built this life after loss. And sometimes, on good days, I believe them. I still have the sealed envelope in my desk drawer. The secret about Gregory's adoption, about the baby I lost and never knew I lost. The nuclear option I never used. I'll never tell him. That's my decision. Robert trusted me to make that choice, and I've made it. Gregory is my son, adoption or not. That truth doesn't need to be complicated by questions about biology and inheritance and identity. He has enough to work through as it is. Some secrets are kindnesses. Some truths do more harm than good. That envelope will stay sealed, and when I die, it'll be destroyed. Let Gregory have that certainty, at least. That whatever else is complicated between us, he's my son. Period. As I'm watching the sunset, my phone buzzes. A text from Gregory. Asterisk thinking of you. Hope you're having a good evening. I'm grateful for you, Mom. For your patience. For giving me a chance to be better. Love you. Asterisk. 3 little words at the end. Love you. Words I haven't heard from him in years. I type back, asterisk love you too. Talk soon. Asterisk. And I mean it. Both parts. I do love him. I never stopped, even when I wanted to. And we will talk soon. Because we're building something new now. Not trying to recapture what we lost, but creating something different. More honest. More real. It's not perfect. It's not the fairytale reconciliation where everything is magically fixed. But it's real. It's progress. And it's enough. The sun finishes setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Another day ending. Another day survived. Another day lived on my own terms. I think about that girl crying outside Henderson High School. The one who felt like she'd never be enough. Who thought her poverty defined her worth. Who couldn't imagine a future where she mattered. I wish I could go back and tell her, you're going to be okay. More than okay. You're going to build a beautiful life. You're going to love and be loved. You're going to face terrible things and survive them. You're going to stand up for yourself when it matters most. You're going to matter, Patricia Holloway. Not because of who you marry or what you achieve or whether your son loves you. But because you're you. And that's enough. That was always enough. But I can't go back. None of us can. We can only move forward. So that's what I'm doing. Moving forward. Living my life. Making my choices. Building my future. I'm 70 years old, and I'm just getting started. Before I go, I want to say thank you. Thank you for listening to my story. For staying with me through all of this, the betrayal, the fight, the heartbreak, the slow rebuilding. If you made it this far, you're part of my journey now. Part of my tribe of people who understand what it means to survive family trauma, to stand up for yourself, to refuse to disappear. If you've got your own story like this, your own battle with people who should have loved you better, drop a comment. Tell me where you are. Tell me you're surviving. Tell me you're more than what they tried to make you. And check that description box below. I've got more stories there. Stories about people who refused to stay silent. Who fought back. Who survived. Who learned to matter on their own terms. This was my story. But it's not just mine. It's everyone's who's ever been told they don't count. Who's ever been made to feel small. Who's ever had to prove their worth to people who should have seen it all along. We survived. We stood up. We mattered. And we always will.